Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Information Management in the Age of AI. I'm Nina, Production Manager at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's events. Hyperscience, Shiny Docs, and Square 9 are the sponsors of today's webinar with contributions from AIIM and Deep Analysis. We thank them for their support and thank you for the time to join us today. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few tips for participating in today's webinar. In the chat box, we'll share links to resources and references pertaining to today's webinar. Go to the chat now, say hello, and let us know where you're joining from. If you have any questions for the speakers, ask them in the Q&A section or put them in the chat. We'll do our best to get to them at the end of each session, if there's time. Also, a friendly reminder, this webinar is being recorded. So you can catch anything that you have missed posted the next day on AIIMS.org's Resources Learning Center page in a few days. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a link to our feedback survey. Let us know how we did. Your feedback is important to us. Now to introduce today's host of MC, Kevin Crane. As AIIMS content strategist, Kevin authors ebooks and infographics on a wide variety of intelligent information management and digital transformation topics. He's the producer and host of AIM On Air's podcast, which was recently listed as a top 10 business process management podcast and named one of 2022's top electronic discovery podcasts by Player FM. Take it away, Kevin.
Hi, Nina. Thanks a lot. And thanks everybody for being with us again today for another important AIM mega webinar about information management in the age of AI. It's an important topic because, of course, artificial intelligence is in the news. It's on our minds. With ChatGPT and generative AI, we've all been wondering if this is a sign that AI has finally come of age and what it really means for information management and information governance. To put things in perspective for us today, and to separate where we are today in contrast with just a couple of years ago when many folks were skeptical about the true impact of AI on our industry, ChatGPT has now over 100 million users as of June 2023. And indeed, ChatGPT has set a record as the fastest growing consumer application in history. Since its release in November of last year, ChatGPT has been attracting headlines, as we know, for its much hyped potential, much of it owing to the fact that it's got a chat box format, which opens up a dialogue between humans and AI and allows us to request information on highly specific topics, everything from quantum computing to the principles of flower arrangement, for example, or in just about everything you can think of in between. And this has sparked a lot of social concern and a lot of business attention. We have actors and writers on strike in Hollywood in the US, for example, in part because of fears that generative AI may displace their craft. And we have businesses of all kinds everywhere looking to AI to be a fundamental shift in operations. Indeed, many are looking to AI to break barriers into new markets and new ways of working. So yeah, AI is more than just a buzzword. AI's ability to deal with the chaos of information, understand context and relationships, and learn over time makes it a game changer, performing any number of complex activities and working with terabytes, petabytes of data, which is simply not possible with humans alone. And the implications are and will be far-reaching. But this subject today is really much bigger than just ChatGPT. We've all known for some time that AI and its related technologies have the potential to radically upend operations and improve and automate core business processes, especially those that deal with large amounts of information. But things are different now, and I think we all feel it at some level. We are at an important inflection point in technology history, sort of like when Google came on the scene, remember that? Or when the first iPhone arrived. In just a few years, in my opinion, AI-driven virtual assistants will become as common as an iPhone and as familiar as Google. You know it. We don't really need to be a futurist or a technologist to know that it's coming, whether we like it or not. So what does that all mean for information management professionals? What should we know today, and what should we do to be prepared for information management in the age of AI? Well, that's what we'll be exploring in today's webinar with a great panel of guests. Our experts will discuss the impact AI has and will continue to have on information management. We'll gain some insights into what our organizations can do to take full advantage of AI. We'll learn the AIIM methods and tactics that are needed to really maximize AI's potential. We'll understand the value of information governance as AI's use increases, and we'll learn how to shore up our processes to help AI be more efficient. So stand by for a great webinar today. But before I introduce our guests, I do say that we want to hear from you too. If you have a question for our guests today, please post them in the Q&A feature. That's where I'll be looking for questions, and we'll have some time in the later part of each presenter segment for your questions. So with all of that, let's get to our first panelist today, starting with Alan Pelz-Sharp. Alan, are you with us?
I am with you.
Hello, Alan. Very good. Alan Pelz-Sharp is the founder and principal analyst at Deep Analysis. Where are you calling in from, Alan?
Philadelphia, South Philly. That's
Philadelphia, a wonderful city. Fantastic.
A very wonderful
well,
city.
Alan, all right. You are here to tell us a bit about the state of the AI marketplace. Tell us a little bit more and set the ground for us today.
Okay. Well, I will share some slides with you, and I'll go through them fairly rapidly because we've really only got a short period of time here. So my goal here is frankly to set a context, as Kevin said, for what's to come up. And I'm not going to spend much time on things like this, but I do want to point out there's a bullet point there that says free consultation. It's really free advice session. So we block out some hours every month. And if you want to call us up and ask any old question on this topic of AI or process automation or documents management or whatever your problems, we're happy to do that in confidence. But I say that because this is such a big and complex topic. And, you know, Kevin alluded to it there. I mean, this is massive right now. Let's focus it in to sort of AIIM's world. We can put it like that. Okay, so we're talking here about document automation. We're talking about information management, etc. Well, just in this space alone, right? My company, my research company, Deep Analysis, we track over 500 companies. And that's crazy. It's so many. So, you know, if you think it's just the same old names, you'd be very wrong. There's a lot going on here, and an awful lot of money has been invested into AI and its focus on text and documents and unstructured data. And in fact, this is not scientific, but I think we're probably being conservative here. 80% plus of the vendors that we talk to and are briefed with claim to leverage AI. Right, so it's the vast majority, So that's all the hype. Tons of money, tons of vendors, everybody's using AI. We've all got to get on board. That's all true. However, when you dig beneath the surface, it's not quite how it seems. These are early days. I agree with Kevin. We all have to embrace this. We all have to get our heads around it because it is coming, right? But you do have to be careful. There's a lot of AI washing going on. And what we mean by that is people using the term AI in their marketing, but maybe there isn't really all that much AI there when you dig beneath the surface, right? And sometimes there's none at all. I was at a conference earlier this year in New York, and it was awful. The conference was great, but it was an awful experience because I came across a number of vendors there who, when I actually looked at their products, their AI products, there was no AI. It just literally wasn't. There was some business intelligence, there was some rules, there's no AI. And often there's little or not much. Or we integrate with AI, right? So at the moment, just about every vendor integrates with, GPT or OpenAI or whatever. And yes, they do. Are their customers actually using it yet? Not really. Now, a lot of their customers, though, are starting to play around with it. And that's what's really interesting, right? Because again, these are early days. So people are interested, people are starting to play around, and as we would call them, proof of concepts. There's just an enormous amount of those going on at the moment, but actual implementations at scale, not so much, right? So as I said, we'll focus on the intelligent information management sector and what's going on here. And the most obvious area here is just good old document processing. About 5 years, 6 years ago, I guess now, there was a bit of a mini revolution. And this is, we're not talking about OpenAI and GPT here, generative AI. No. We're talking about the fact that the traditional world of document capture, right, where you scan, correct, you know that this is a C and not an O, a P and not an S, and whatever, and you create a text file. That's been around for 20, 30 years. But AI suddenly came into the equation. And what you can actually do now, and there are many, many, many products out there at the moment, you go way beyond that extraction of characters and structure, right? These systems can literally read the documents. They can put them into context. They can enrich them. They can classify them. And to some degree, they can understand them. This is where we have to be careful, right? AI is not actually intelligent, right? It's not actually intelligent. We use these human terms in technology, which can be very misleading. But nevertheless, they can understand them to the degree that this is an invoice, it belongs to this is a contract where there's a problem in this clause, etc. And this is a huge, huge step forward. Now, out there in the real world, most people are still scanning, creating text files or TIFF images or whatever. That's changing, and that's changing at pace. Now, the fact that you can do clever things like actually enrich, put into context, understand is cool. But think about it, that's business change, right? You've now, your organization now has to actually change. And as I said, there's actually 400 more I should have had on this slide. There's a lot of vendors out here. Now, I'm not endorsing any of these vendors. These are just people we know, we've spoken to in our research, but it's a good sort of cross selection. I haven't got time to talk to all of them, and it wouldn't be very interesting if I did. So let me just pick on a couple here. Docugami, right? Long form. So this is AI that's been built to really understand long form documents, 30, 40, 50, 100-page documents. That's a bit of a breakthrough, right? That we're able to do that now. AIIM here on the far right. AIIM is an Italian company, small startup, super clever. They're using AI as a mobile device, basically, to really transform the way people interact with documents and capture them. Automation anywhere, you know, whatever. There's loads of them here. Now then, there's too many here, right? When you add up to 500 in any market, no matter how much money there is, there's going to be some consolidation. And sadly, some of them are already starting to suffer. Cloud Hub 360 here is no longer with us. So there'll be a little bit more of that, but there'll be probably even more vendors coming on to join them. So it's a vibrant, thriving market. But I said that, you know, it's great that you can now read and understand automatically what's in a document or a file or whatever structure of information you're examining. But that's got to transfer into an actual business case. That's got to transfer into something of value, because otherwise it's just cool tech, right? So I've just brought up some, these are random, but they're all very different. And that's why I've got them here, right? So you've got companies like IPWE, who's pulling together all of the world's patents, putting them onto a blockchain and analyzing them with AI. And that is a huge potential business. And it's a very, very specific one, right? Hyperscience, you know, is doing a lot. And hyperscience, for example, is really outstanding when it comes to recognizing handwriting, which has always been a massive challenge for any kind of document capture. I won't go through all of them here, but AIIM helping in sort of really complex financial situations, so in financial services. Oracle Cerner is probably the one that goes unnoticed, but is one of the biggest. Oracle spent, I believe, I should have my notes, but I believe it's 23 point something billion to buy the healthcare record company Cerner. Healthcare records, think about it. That's an awful lot of AI and an awful lot of processing going on. And indeed, Oracle has built its own stuff, and it's incredibly impressive. And Burst IQ, similarly in healthcare, doing stuff both with blockchain and AI. There's a lot of really cool and very practical innovation coming to the market. Innovation for the sake of innovation is really of no value, but this is practical, right? These are things that are making a difference. So where do we go next? Well, hype versus reality, right? We've always got to do this bit. Yeah, enormous numbers on the left-hand column there, 20 billion invested, and these numbers will keep going up. You could update this slide probably every month if you wanted, and they would go up. And you've also got, you know, polls coming out and surveys coming out saying that everybody's going to adopt AI in the next few years. I think that's true, but if you think that your organization is falling behind because you're not doing it, you're probably not, okay? This is, again, early days. There's regulatory issues that have to be figured out. There's definitely privacy issues, bias, discrimination. We've got a skills shortage. And the business case has to be built to spend the money, right? And those business cases are still in the early stages, if at all. But let me pick on one here because this is of real importance to all the AIM members, all AIM members. There's a skills shortage. Now, I'm not talking about data scientists, right? What I'm talking about is people who understand how to manage information. All of the old skills, as we might call them, of records management, document management, of building taxonomies and understanding ontologies and version control and privacy and regulations and records, I mean, they are more valuable now than they have ever been. AI does not work unless it has the human skills who know how to use it. And so I encourage everybody here to at least get your head around how AI works. Don't worry about the math. You don't have to worry about anything like that. It's not even about technology. It's really just understanding the building blocks and how this works, because you're going to be using it. You're the people who are going to be driving this, right? And there was a note of caution there, as I was speaking before, saying, well, that's not happening as quick as maybe the hype would have us believe. But it is happening. In the front office, let me take bullet point number 2 there, job descriptions. I met with somebody who'd been laid off, right, from one of the big online job recruitment platforms. I won't say which one, obviously, but that whole department went. That whole department being the department that actually essentially edited job descriptions. They've automated that. Is that a good idea? I'm not sure. I think time will tell how well that works out. But in the back office, certainly people are exploring, you know, using generative AI, for example, for coding, etc. But some of the most interesting areas are around things like contract analysis, yeah, which is very difficult, very time consuming and very expensive to do manually. The rub is AI often does the job better than humans, and that's a tough pill to swallow. But that amount of complex text, even to a trained lawyer, you can slip up. And AI isn't going to replace those people, but my goodness me, can it help them in their work? So I'm sort of rattling forward here quickly to give you a sort of an overview, hopefully. But here's the other thing that we tend to forget about, right? That there are markets which are somewhat saturated. They get a lot of love by all the technology people and, you know, pharmaceutical, insurance, etc. But there's a big world out there that AIM, the people who support AIM, the vendors and everybody, they're sort of relatively green field. You've got the food chain, you've got automotive, you've got engineering, huge potential here. And they are very, very interested in using AI. But they, again, don't necessarily have the skills. They don't necessarily have their information structured the way it should be. And that's the key thing. AI, unless you've actually got your data in some kind of good shape, isn't going to do a good job. So challenges, definitely. Consolidation coming, absolutely. Too many vendors. The market's tough. I could spend the next hour talking about the tough state of the tech market, but I won't. But nevertheless, you know, for all the negative stories, This is not going away. This is not going away. This is going to continue to grow. There's massive expectations. Yeah, maybe some of those will be disappointing, but there's going to be massive change ahead. And actually, despite all the negatives around the funding, there's still a lot of money going into AI. There's still a lot of money getting invested. The thing we always have to remember, and I'm sure this will come up throughout the day, it's all about balancing human and artificial intelligence, right? One doesn't work very well without the other, and don't let anybody fool you otherwise. And this is a huge opportunity for the membership of AIIM to step up, frankly, and basically take control in the sense of leading the way, using these tools and using them sensibly. So with that, I was rattling through that. I think I've finished on time. I've tried my best to. And I'll see. By the way, anybody can reach out to me. Can't promise I can answer all your questions, but I'll give it a good go. Kevin, are there any questions? Kevin, you are on mute.
You got to press the mute button. That's one thing I should learn. That is Alan Pell-Sharp from Deep Analysis. Find Alan, find out more at deep-analysis.com. Now, Alan, if you have a question for Alan, now would be the time to enter it into the Q&A feature. Alan, one question that I have for you, you started out by mentioning something that I've been thinking about as well. Not every solution that is touted to be an AI-based solution is really an AI solution. How do I differentiate between solutions that say they have AI and those that really do?
It's a really tough one. I mean, I mentioned there's a lot of proof of concepts going on. And I think this is the kind of technology you have to run a proof of concept, right? Whether you pay for it or the vendor offers it for free, you've got to. And the reason you've got to is show it working with my data, please. Things demo beautifully, right? But when it hits your data, is it actually able to learn and adapt to your data? I mean, that's the big giveaway, right? So, or does it really have to be rebuilt? Now, you can get expert advice. You can come, I mean, you don't have to come to us. You can go to Gartner. You can go to, there's lots of people around there who can give you advice as well. But I really strongly recommend that people test these with their own data before ever moving forward.
Okay. All right. Well, we do have some question coming in for you, Alan. This one from Kristen. How can businesses incorporate AI if the accuracy is questionable and the means to validate it?
That's a really good question. No, it's a great question, because here's the reality, right? Most of the AI that is in use, and there is a lot of it out there already in our industry, it's used for relatively simple but business critical use cases. So the cliche, but it's the reality. Invoice processing, right? It's more accurate, it's fast, it's super, it's cheap, it works, right? Your accuracy levels with something like that are going to be almost, there's never such a thing as 100%, but you're almost going to be 100%, right? When you're getting into longer textual type situations, yeah, your error rate's going to go up. And that's where you have to make a decision. I mean, that's why you test it first. The positive is that it will learn and it will get more accurate over time. That's the beauty of AI. It actually improves over time, right? But that's a business decision you have to make. For some, an error here or there isn't going to matter, right? In customer service, unless it's a really bad error, I mean, frankly, customer service makes errors anyway, so you're going to have some errors. If you're talking about somebody being released on parole or getting a loan or healthcare, then you might want to have a super high accuracy rate. And again, it comes back to the humans, keeping the humans in the loop to keep it honest.
One of the questions that always comes up when people think about, talk about AI in business in general is it a threat to my job? One question may be on the minds of our viewers today, is the growth of AI a threat to information management professionals? Now, you were talking about a skills shortage, and I hear consistently from C-suite executives that a skill shortage is an inhibitor to their success of digital transformation in general. So what I'm hearing from you is that perhaps a skill shortage is a good thing for information management professionals, because the
Good.
skills that are bedrock to that profession are going to be rising in demand, and there is not enough talent to go
There's a
around. Am I
desperate,
about right?
there's a desperate sort of shortage. It's, I mean, I hate to say it, but some jobs will be impacted. That's just reality. Some jobs will be impacted, but broadly speaking, the world of information management, this is a boom time coming. These are the skills most needed. Again, the AI is not going to do anything of any value without those information management professionals running the show. And so the opportunities are really good for our industry. This is, I think you used the term inflection point. This is it. The next 5 to 10 years, your skills, if you've got them, are going to be really highly in demand.
All right. Alan, we have time for just one more question coming from our audience today. Along your thoughts about testing with our own data, as you put it, we always will have documents with different languages. Recognition processed sometimes works badly for this reason. Do you have any experience or advice regarding handling multiple languages?
Yes, that's actually quite a technical one to answer. So I'll answer at a very high level, but I can happily pick it up offline. The reality is all AI is not the same, right? You know, AI is built for specific use cases. I mean, yes, you've got OpenAI, but most of the AI out there is built for very specific use cases. There are AI techniques which handle multiple languages. I'm not going to say every language, because there probably isn't the knowledge base there for a lot of regional languages, but, you know, Chinese, Arabic, English, German, French, etc. They're pretty much language agnostic, right? Because it's breaking it down into data, and the way it breaks it down is it spots the patterns in the language. And so there are tools out there that you can feed it with 10 different languages and it understands them all equally well and in context with one another. That's pretty advanced AI.
How far away are we? How far away are we from the Star Trek Universal Translator?
A long way. And the reason being, in terms of business use cases, it's a limited language set, right? So within legal, within construction, within whatever, natural language is naturally evolving. And the reality is things like OpenAI have largely been trained on English language documents. And a lot of stuff has only been trained on one language. So they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the training of these other languages. So, and darn it, the languages keep on evolving. Can you believe it? So it's a tough one. But to get to a point where there's a basic understanding, yeah, we're probably only a few years away, but a thorough understanding, believe it or not, that could actually be beyond AI's capabilities, because AI isn't infinitely capable, I'm afraid.
Well, I guess
yeah, because if you take OpenAI, it stopped essentially about 2 years ago learning, right?
Okay.
Yeah, well, language has moved on in the last 2 years.
All right. But the point is, the application in business for multiple languages is there already today, and will become more robust in the short term.
100%.
So there are applications that can be used for at least this business application.
Yeah, and they work very well.
That is Alan Peltz-Sharp, founder and principal at Deep Analysis, deep-analysis.com. Alan, I know you'll be back for our panel discussion on AI accountability, but for now, thank you so much for being a part of our program, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks very much.
Well, let's move on to our next panel guest today, Stephen Young. Stephen, are you with us?
Yes, I am. How are you today?
Hello, Stephen. Stephen Young is president and CEO of Square 9 Softworks. Stephen, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from today?
New Haven, Connecticut today.
New Haven, Connecticut. A beautiful place. All right, very good. Thank you so much for being with us, Stephen. You are here to talk about reimagining our accounts payable processes with artificial intelligence. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I thought Alan brought up some great observations in his presentation a few minutes ago, and I just wanted to expand on some of those as we go through this. So I'll get started here. I've got just a few slides that I wanted to walk through, but it's a fascinating time. It really is, with taking artificial intelligence and incorporating into a solid business case that can be used. So again, you know, as Kevin had mentioned, I'm with Square 9 Softworks. We proudly say that we take the paper out of work. Again, I was one of the founding partners of Square 9 back in the early 2000s. I've been in this industry, I hate to say it now, but over 30 years. So I've watched a lot of transitions through this time, and it's interesting to see where we're going. What I wanted to talk specifically about today dealt with a business case that, as Alan mentioned, is very usable, highly accurate, and something that everyone can take advantage of. So again, about Square 9, we're an intelligent information management software. Again, we like to say we take the paper out of work, and we look to make it easier for you to automate many aspects of what you do. So AI is just one tool in the stack that we have right now. You know, we look to extract information, whether it's from scanned images, from PDFs, from emails, and we look to make it usable to your business processes, and whether it's consumed by your systems like your accounts payable system or your ERP. You know, that's where we see the value. So I'm going to talk specifically about accounts payable automation, where some of the opportunities for change are. About something that we've introduced called Transform AI. And no, this is not AI washing. I had to laugh when I heard Alan say that. There is a lot of that out there. People are calling business intelligence AI. This is actual AI. We joke that people use the abbreviation AI and they mean actual individuals who are doing the work behind the scenes. But and then we'll just wrap this up and go into a Q&A for anyone who's interested. So, you know, we all know what it's like to work with paper. It's profit sapping, it smothers innovation, and it just really is a process that, again, something we've dreamed about for years. When can we just snap our fingers and make these paper processes go away? And this was expanded on. When you look at what just happened with the pandemic, so many people became aware that the processes that they had in place just weren't working any longer when you know, people were working remotely, working from home or from remote locations, and they couldn't connect and pass the information around the office the way that they used to. So specifically talking about accounts payable, why do we look at this? First of all, it's a highly repetitive process, and there is definitely a proven ROI. I think if you've read any of the AIIM statistics, you'll see varying costs for how much it takes to process an invoice, but there's no doubt that there is incredible room for automation here and for improvement and for a return on your investment. That average cost to key and code invoices I've seen range everywhere from $14 to $35. It typically requires some level of invoice approval routing, where someone needs to say, yes, we received these goods, and yes, it's okay to pay it. And then there's additional manual processes that take place in accounts payable, things like 2- and 3-way matching, where you're looking at a purchase order, an invoice, and maybe a packing list to make sure that what was received or what was ordered was actually received and billed correctly. So at Square 9, we see about 80% of our digital transformation projects beginning in AR. Now, people go outside of that afterwards. Once they've made that initial investment, they quickly look at other areas of their business, whether it's human resources or contracts management, even accounts receivable. But this is where we find most people will justify that initial investment. So we've seen change over the last few years. You know, this process of accounts payable automation has been going through some gyrations. You see invoice approval workflows are up. It's nearly doubled again in the last year, but invoice approval workflows were up 71% for those who look to automate. Invoice capture and coding up 63%, payment authorization 57%, and PO matching 30%. But still, only about 22% of people have fully automated their AP processes. And again, this is independent data from CPA Practice Advisor. The problem that we're seeing is that it all relies on that transformation of documents to intelligent information. That's where the rubber hits the road. So information is unusable when it resides on paper or when it's in a PDF or in an email. So we need to be able to transform that data in a way that makes it accurate, fast, and cost effective. And that's really where AI has changed the game in accounts payable processing. You know, if you look back at the old way of doing things, you know, maybe pre-2005, when the first revolution of AP automation really kicked in, it was a paper-driven process. And again, it was about handing off files for review and approval. And, you know, we had the typical lost documents, penalties for late payments, and you know, really damage to your vendor relations by slow payments. It required data entry. There was an inefficient use of your resources that was time consuming. It wasn't cost effective. And yes, it was prone to error. So we started to see things change between, say, 2007 and just recently. We started to see much more around template-based capture. And this is what Alan referred to as intelligent automation or intelligent extraction. Template-based would typically require you to set up a template, and whether you were using strategy based on the structure of it or what it was looking for, you would be able to extract this information with a fairly high level of accuracy. But again, these were typically very structured documents, you know, where you had a header and a footer and there was line item data in between. The problem was that it had higher implementation costs. So you were paying people for their technical assistance to set up these templates, and that could be very time consuming. I know this because this is part of our business. This is what we did. Those costs could, as a result, balloon greatly based on the number of vendors or the level of automation that you wanted to receive. And more importantly, they need to be regularly maintained. You know, as vendors change, we just recently switched our ERP to NetSuite, and all of our formats changed. So any of our vendors would, any of our customers would find a very different bill coming from us. It would change the format. And so as new vendors are added, you'd also have to add new templates or adjust existing templates so that it would accommodate those. So some of the opportunities for change, this really depends on your appetite for change, right? So there's ways to move away from a paper-based world and provide access to information for your users. And then one of the first ways is just simple capture and storage. You know, I want to eliminate the paper in my organization. I just want to be able to capture them accurately and file them away. Then there's invoice approval routing. Again, this exploded. We saw a huge spike in our business back in the pandemic because, again, people needed to automatically push those through their organization to get approvals. Automating the three-way match is, again, a very time-consuming process that people don't enjoy, and this is a way that we could do it automatically. And then you could extend the value of your investment if you wanted to add focused solutions like purchase requisitions or vendor W-9 management for tax compliance. The real thing, though, is being able to share this data with your financial applications. So again, eliminating that manual data entry and allowing that information to flow seamlessly into your ERP and become usable. And whether or not that's QuickBooks or the new Dynamics 365, Sage, SAP, it doesn't matter. We can push that data into anything that you're looking for. So we always talk about solving for capture. And again, Transform AI really is a game changer for us in our industry. Again, we're looking to capture information from invoices, receipts, and more without the use of templates. So we accurately capture the information. We reduce the professional service costs for setting it up. You have faster, more convenient data validation, and then you can release it to any format that you want. Certainly, you could release it to our document management product, As a matter of fact, we have a lot of the tools that are built in for data validation and for automation that you can leverage. But again, if you want to just release it to SharePoint or Citrix ShareFile or Google Drive, that's an option as well. We're independent and we'll allow the data to flow wherever you'd like it to. So this effortless invoice capture, a question came up about accuracy, and Alan alluded to the fact that this is highly accurate. Our internal testing on our AI engine has shown a 99.3% accuracy, just right out of the box. So things like vendor name, invoice number, receipt total, whatever the case might be, you can see all of these fields. And again, this is really focused on the header data and the footer data, that information that is most needed to process an invoice. But it's not limited to that. We've also added that ability to extract line item data. And this is really where you see a lot of the mistakes that are being made in a process. Whether it's long SKUs that you have to type in or extended descriptions or whatever the case might be. Again, we can do this, and we can incorporate, as I mentioned before, tools that we have within our software to validate that data, performing calculations on the data that's been extracted, ensuring tolerances, and making sure that that data is accurate. So if we take a look at solution delivery now and then, and this is really what I wanted to focus on, because again, many of the people who looked at doing accounts payable automation in the past saw it cost prohibitive, and it was primarily because of the professional service charges that were involved. So if we looked at a standard AP integration process before AI, we could easily see 15 to 20, even more, 30 days, depending on the size of the organization, depending on the number of vendors. So setting up that accounts payable process, vendor invoice approval, a couple of days for that, template creation, that was the big thing. Testing and ensuring that we are getting accurate extraction could range from 5 to 10 days. I've seen it go much longer. A requisition process, for example, incorporating that into your project would be 2 to 3 days. And again, a W-9 process for tax compliance, again, another 2 to 3 days. What we've done is we've built something called a solutions delivery network. We can actually download many of these in a templated form. So the delivery of this in conjunction with the use of AI brings that down from 15 to 20 days down to 3 to 5 days, and sometimes even less. I mean, again, what we've been able to do here is really make this affordable for organizations of all size and give them a highly accurate solution. So Alan brought up another good point. Try it for yourself. Well, we encourage you to go to our website at the bottom. You'll see a link that says Try Transform AI for yourself. You can visit our website. You can drop in a handful of invoices. I believe it takes up to 5 at a time. And what will happen is you'll just drag and drop those into the screen, put in your email address, and we'll email you back the images with the results so that you can see the accuracy for yourself. I think it's a great way to get comfortable with the technology, again, using your information and extracting it both with the header, footer, and line item. So again, this is a tremendous area for improvement. I hope that this was informative to you. Again, if you have any questions or you'd like to connect with us, you can see all our contact information there. But AI has really transformed the world of accounts payable and in a very positive way for everyone. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Kevin, to see if there's any questions that have come up.
Thank you. Yes. All right. That is Stephen Young, President and CEO of Square 9 Softworks. You can find him and find out more at square-9.com. We do have some questions, Stephen, coming in. This one from Janice. Janice is asking, how is this different from machine learning services that use algorithms?
Sure. Well, we used to do a lot of machine learning, and we actually incorporate some machine learning into our processes separate from the AI. What we have is an AI service that's running centrally that we basically, as an invoice comes in, we hand it off to our AI service. It's processed. and then it's returned to the individual, to the process where it can be completed. Now, there may be times where machine learning is very important. Give you an example, something like a logo. Okay, logos typically incorporate some level of graphic element, and many times they're very difficult to read. In addition to that, you need, in order to be able to pass that information from the extracted data to your accounts payable system, it needs to match your vendor master list. So let's say, for example, you extracted Square 9 from our logo right there. If you have us listed in your vendor master list as Square 9 Softworks Incorporated, which is the official name of our company, it needs to match. We can incorporate machine learning. So one touch of it, you correct it once and it knows it going forward, and you won't have to worry about making that change any longer. So it's not just one single technology, it's one piece of technology in our stack. And again, this is using very complex algorithms to identify, interrogate, and extract that information with a high level of accuracy. Machine learning was really more about us going in and teaching it how to look for the information that you're looking for. And that's in our products as well. It still resides and it still has a place of use, but as AI continues to grow, we'll see it less and less. Again, this is really focused on the accounts payable side.
All right, Stephen, and if you have a question for Stephen, now would be the time to enter them into the Q&A feature. That's where we're watching for questions, so we'll get them up for Stephen here. Stephen, this next question coming in from Kristen. Thank you, Kristen, for your question and participation today. Kristen asks, how do storage costs compare between cloud storage and analog storage of information? Businesses are paying third parties for maintenance, security, risk response, etc.
Well, yeah, that's not AI related, but it's a very legitimate question. Again, what we're seeing right now is more and more people are pushing it, their information storage to the cloud for a number of different reasons. Certainly, you can maintain it locally, and we have many customers who do that. But up in the cloud, we're constantly penetration testing our software, our environment. We're hardening it all the time, protecting it against breaches. This is our business. It's what we do. And it's extremely inexpensive these days. I mean, when you look at what a gigabyte or a terabyte of information costs now to store in the cloud as compared, there's no comparison. And especially when you take the risk out of it, you talk about things like the measures that we take to ensure HIPAA compliance, for example, or SOC 2 compliance. It costs an organization a lot when you factor all those into their real storage costs and not just that of a server or a drive.
All right. This next question coming in from Mason. Mason asked, have you considered using Microsoft Syntex for AP processing automation?
We have not. Again, I am familiar with Microsoft Syntex. There's a number of different products that are out there, whether it's from AWS or from Google. There's a number of different ones. Again, what you're seeing there is raw AI. It is, again, give us a document and we'll give you back the data. With our product, what we're doing is we're actually incorporating a lot of those things that you're talking about, validation, that ability to go and look with a level of accuracy, whether or not we've extracted that, using that confidence, putting that in front of a person so they can get eyes on it. What you don't want to see is, for example, a decimal point that's moved over 3 spaces, and you end up paying a much bigger bill than what you anticipated. So I think those are great products, but I also think that you need to wrap them into a real platform that will allow you to solve the problem holistically.
We are here with Stephen Young from Square 9 Softworks. Stephen, this next question coming in from Byron. Byron asks, what size businesses are you seeing are most open to having an outside company automate the AP versus their internal IT department doing it?
We're seeing an increasing level going to outside sources. Again, we can work internally to set up a system and allow you to work locally and handle this internally. We're not, again, taking, this is not an outsourced service where we're doing the processing for you. This is a process where you are hands-on with it. So again, from a cloud basis, we've probably gone over to about 80-20. There's still some holdovers for people, but when you're talking about data like accounts payable, which is probably some of the least risky data to work with, really, it's a no-brainer for many of these companies when they evaluate the costs to put that up into the cloud and use a third party for that.
How do you see AI impacting a scanning service bureau?
You know, I don't know. I think, first of all, I know a lot of service bureaus myself, friends with some people who own them, and there is definitely a change coming in the horizon. Many of them are doing accounts payable processing that's being outsourced right now. Again, though, I do believe that it is an entire process, that it's not something you can run in a vacuum. So if you choose to have your documents outsourced, they still need to be validated. It could, in fact, achieve their profitability and lower costs for their customers. But at the same time, it will definitely have an impact.
All right. Now, what about security of information? Now, we're applying AI to information on the cloud. The first thing that people think about is the security of that information. Cyber hackers are becoming increasingly sophisticated. Even the biggest, most secure providers are getting hacked. What do you say to folks that are worried about the security aspect of their information?
Well, again, it depends on what we're talking about. You know, again, accounts payable information is not highly sensitive. Certainly, there's opportunities for fraud. It amazes me, some of the spam that I get right now, where people send my employees requests to cut them checks and things of that nature, using actual vendors that we use. It never ceases to fail. It never fails to amaze me what creative minds are out there trying to get at our information. But at the same time, knock on wood, we've never had a breach with our systems. We've designed them in such a way that we've segmented the data and we've siloed it so that it's very difficult to get across if there was a penetration, even a misuse of credentials, for example. So we've taken a lot of steps. And again, things like constant hardening. We have people that just focus on the hardening of our environment, which very few other organizations have. You'd be surprised at how many organizations I speak with who say, yeah, we just had an attack. We just got hit with ransomware and we're struggling. We've been down for 3 days or something like that, where it's much more difficult when someone is focusing on hardening that environment constantly. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's less likely if you're putting that level of focus on it.
All right, that is Stephen Young, President and CEO of Square9 Softworks. Find him at square-9.com. Stephen, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
I appreciate it. It was a great opportunity. I'm enjoying the conversation so far. I look forward to hearing the rest of it.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, very good. Let's move on now to, I guess, a mini panel discussion hosted or moderated by Tori Miller-Liu. Tori, are you with us? Hello, Tori.
I am. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Tori. Tori, of course, is the CEO of AIIM International. She's here to conduct a small panel discussion on AIIM's response on AI accountability recently. Tori will be joined by Alan Pelt-Sharp from Deep Analysis. Alan, are you with us?
I am still here.
Alan is back with us. Also, Jed Cawthorn, evangelist at Shiny Docs. Jed, are you with us?
I hope I am. How is it sounding?
All right. Well, everyone, welcome aboard. We are here to talk about AIIM's position on AI accountability. AIIM recently released a position statement on AI accountability, a formal response to request from the U.S. National Telecommunications and Information Administration. So, Tori, tell us a little bit more about that response and what we can expect moving forward, and bring aboard our panel to discuss AI accountability.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I'm so excited to share more about the comment and our response to the comment today. And I'm joined by my co-authors, Alan and Jed. Let's just jump right into the questions, and hopefully we'll answer some of the audience's questions about what was this comment, why did we do it, just by way of introduction. So I'm gonna I warned you guys that I was going to ad lib a little bit today, and I'm going to ad lib right out of the gate by asking you, why do you think it was important for AIIM to make a comment in response to back up for a second? NTIA asked the US public and the international public at large to make a comment on AI accountability, which means that the US government, like many governments around the world, are probably gearing up to put standards and regulations in place. And this particular request for comment was focused on how do we hold AI technology and systems accountable. So by way of introduction, Alan, do you mind sharing why you thought it was important for AIIM to comment on it, but also why you yourself was interested in AIIM's response and helping to author it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, part of the answer is in the name, isn't it? AIIM, information management, right? That's where the body that's supposed to be having a position here. And at the end of the day, for all the continued noise and hype around AI, it is serious stuff, and our members are seriously going to be, many of them already are, be seriously impacted by this. And I think we needed to make a statement for a couple of reasons. One, to point out, we can probably talk about this in more detail, but there isn't a thing called AI. There is no one thing called AI. Like, that's just not true. Right? There's lots of tools out there. There's lots of techniques. There's lots of different things. You could argue every single implementation is different, right? Because it's got different data. That matters, right? That really matters. And whether we're talking about information governance, we're talking about compliance and regulation, these are things our members care about, right? They're seeing this flood of technology hit the market. They're being told they're all going to be adopting it. Apparently it's a done deal. They've all got to use it. Well, hold on. Under what framework am I going to use it? Am I allowed to use it? So there's just so much noise out there and so much confusion. I think we had to have a say in it. And my hope is to bring some clarity, right, to the fact that, to use that phrase, not all AI is equal, right? We've just heard that in the previous session from Square 9. Not all data is equally sensitive, right? It's just not. I mean, if somebody gets to see your invoice, I guess maybe that's a big problem, but it's not on the same level, is it, to some other information, right? That a legal or a healthcare company or doctor's office. I mean, so there's a world of complexity out of there, and we're all in favor of having proper regulations. That's a great thing, but they've got to be appropriate, right? Just blanket statements aren't going to help anybody.
How about you, Jed?
Your answer, wasn't it, than the one you were
No, it was a great answer. I think that was a great kickoff. But Jed, how about you? I mean, why were you personally interested in getting involved with the comment? What does AI mean for Shiny Docs and for you professionally?
Well, I'll start with me professionally first, because I think, to be fair, Alan covered a lot of what AI means to vendors in the tech space, as a whole, and very eloquently, as Alan always does. Personally, as a member of a professional body, I want my professional body to represent me and the fellows of my fellow members, rather, and take on tasks like these. And so whether it's NTIA in this case, whether it's other US federal agencies, whether it's the EU, I'm not particularly bothered who's asking the questions, but I would like to see AIIM step forward to provide input in response to those questions. So I was keen to be involved because I think it's something we should be doing as a professional body, as a professional who takes his professional development seriously. I don't mind stepping up to volunteer for such things. So that's why, from a personal perspective, I guess to Alan's point, AI is everywhere. It's a topic of the moment because of generative, and we'll come on to that, I'm sure. But AI is everywhere. To be honest, we've all been using it for years, even if you didn't know it. Shiny Docs has AI capabilities. Both, we use open source technology that everybody else uses, and we've also got some patent pending clever stuff of our own. So it's a prevalent topic and one that we care about.
That's great. Thank you. And backing up just for a second to that word accountability, because we've all three of us used that at this point. In terms of AI, what does accountability mean? And is it actually achievable? I don't know who wants to take that first. It's a little loaded, but
no, I don't know. I think it's a good question. I guess it's a loaded question, but it's an important one. At the end of the day, what you can't escape from is whether you're a government department or you're a private company, right? You're responsible. So if you're using AI and something goes wrong, tough, it's your fault. So here's where it all gets tricky with the regulations, right? Is that you can regulate AI as much as you want, but ultimately it's the people who use it are responsible for it. And I don't know that everybody's quite grasped that. We've been through this before. Gosh, it must be nearly 20 years ago. There was a regulation called Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX, as people like to call it, right? And the market, and I'm talking about our market, by the way, AIIM's world, was flooded with products saying that they were SOX compliant. No, they're not. Not one of them was. A product cannot be SOX compliant. It's a tool that you could use to become compliant, right? And it's exactly the same here. And so back to your original question, that's why we have to be involved in this conversation. It's the members of AIIM and their organizations that will be held responsible if and when things go wrong. And realistically, stuff will go wrong. And that's just reality, right? I think AI brings a huge amount of benefits and positives. But when it goes wrong, it can really go spectacularly wrong. So I think, the responsibility bit, when we say responsible AI, there are techniques and approaches such as explainable AI and whatever, for sure. There's also the responsibility to train on clean, proper data. But it's a mix of human and technology here, right? The responsibility thing. So when we say responsible AI, we're not talking specifically about algorithms. We're talking about the tools and the people who use them and the people who build them, right? Because it's a mix. And I think that sometimes gets lost, as if it's some kind of magic bullet that's got it all figured out in advance, and it hasn't.
Ted, would you
philosophically here, aren't we?
Yeah, no, I'd pick up on what Alan said at the beginning. Accountability is it's spread across the board. So we tend to think when we see the headlines in the news about the accountability of Microsoft or OpenAI or Google or Meta, whoever's developing the models, there is accountability for us as information professionals within our organizations. There is an accountability of the board to the shareholders. If your implementation of some AI algorithm goes badly wrong, as Alan was just alluding to, and causes you reputational harm, or just, however, loses you billions of dollars. So that accountability sits at many levels and in many places, and it includes us as end users. It includes us as influencers, not in the TikTok way, but, in the, hey, CIO, we should be using this or shouldn't be using this. Depends. So that accountability piece is key. And I think we covered that in the response. And I think we also told the NTIA that you know, there is some accountability that sits with them as well. And we would like to see some of, and the other word that Alan used, responsibility. We'd like to see some responsibility set with the federal government in that the way they generate guidelines for people.
And I'm going to pull actually one of the questions from chat to feed off of this one, this idea of accountability. We have a question from Jill about why was there no commentary about ethics in our response? The way AI is built, managed, and used. And it's such an excellent question, Jill. Thank you for that. I would wonder from both of you, how do you see ethics tied to accountability? Is it part of accountability? Is it a different subject?
You know, this is a really tricky one. And it's actually a topic that's close to my heart. You know, as a completely unqualified student of philosophy, ethics is a big topic, and anybody who spent 5 minutes reading into it will know just what a minefield it is, and a fascinating one at that. It's no different with AI. I mean, the example I give to people when this comes up is that, well, what's ethically, I can even use the word morally, correct in one place isn't necessarily the same in another, right? Now, we can disagree with somebody else's stance, but we're going to get, I'll try not to get too controversial here, but there are people who you cannot discriminate against, you know, and that's cool. I'm all down with that, right? We shouldn't be discriminating. Well, actually, there are countries where it's perfectly legal to discriminate against sections of society. So this is where you're getting into regional differences, cultural differences, and it's a tough one. If we just take it at its most basic, though, and we're talking about, and we mentioned it here in responsible AI, the ethical use of AI, yeah, it should be used ethically, as should any tool, right? But again, we've got this spectrum. My take on it is, if you are making decisions which impact somebody's life, you really need to be thinking about even whether you should be using AI. And if you are using AI, at the very least, you should be able to explain how you came to that decision, right? That's not always the case, right? There is AI that is denying people loans, denying people freedoms, whatever you want to say, and nobody can explain how it came to the decision. Like literally nobody can. It's not possible to. The layers within the AI are just, nobody can do it. I think that's unethical, but it's not illegal. I think we could have a whole day on ethics and AI. I mean, it's just such a fascinating topic, but one can only just, I love the question, but I don't know that there's actually an answer.
I also wonder if
the debate.
Yeah, I wonder if NTIA as a standard and regulating body intentionally omitted the word ethics from the questions that they asked.
I suspect so.
They referenced them because I think you're right. Like ethics, it falls into a subjective area where it's hard for a regulator or a standard organizer bearer to actually enforce. And that's what it comes down to. And a lot of our comment was around what is actually enforceable here. Is trust enforceable? Is ethics enforceable? So I think perhaps if we did the comment over again, I think maybe we should have called NTIA on that omission. But Jed, what do you think?
Yeah, you called them out on it. So what the viewers don't know, of course, is that Tori, Alan, and I have discussed this at great length before writing the response, and it's very difficult. And to Alan's point, you know, AIM is a US organization. Tori is a US citizen. I'm a Canadian citizen. I think Alan is probably dual UK and US. As I'm dual Canadian and UK, you know, that whole regional point is a good one. And you might say, well, what's that got to do with the NTIA? They're a US federal government agency and they are the ones asking. Well, because technology developed in the US is going to get used everywhere. So, you know, the regional element is it is a good point to make. Now, I think what we did tell them is our opinion on transparency. And I do think the transparency element at least talks to the ethics. Because if we have transparency in the development of algorithms, including, you know, understanding biases and whether there was a big case in the US, and for the life of me, I can't think if it was Google or Microsoft who was training the machine vision face recognition algorithms, and it was having problem with people of dark skin color. So that's, sorry, who was it, Alan? Which one was it?
It was Google, and
it was
actually at an AIIM conference, Jed, a few years ago. My colleague Cash and I, who's an AI ethicist, we were running a workshop, and Cash App Compeller, right?
Yeah.
He's from India, and
I know him.
he was using, yeah, he was actually using the phone and showing people, look, there's Alan in the picture, and I'm not in the picture.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, I mean, we know it exists. We know it goes on. Now, to me, without using the word ethics, because we use the word transparency, we're diving into that. And we're telling them that our opinions and our thoughts on what transparency in the development of algorithms, in their use cases, in transparency, even in the outcomes derived from their use. So I'm going to say that I think we possibly covered a little bit of the ethics conversation by pushing them on the transparency path.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. I also think that going back to, again, like, I think regulators are going to target things that are low-hanging fruit to enforce the stability of a new technology, right? To build confidence in that new technology. So we just saw an announcement, I think in the last week or so, that a number of the big tech companies like Google and Microsoft have agreed to use watermarking, for instance. So do you both think tactics like watermarking, does that help with trust? And I think this is also going to get us into the muddy water of like trust versus accuracy. But do you think watermarking helps? Is that a practical way to make consumers and companies feel comfortable in using and investing in AI?
I think it's a step in the right direction, but it does indeed take us into the world of trust and accuracy. You know, the reality is, so actually I had a demo with a vendor this morning. It was very good, but they were citing where the sources came. So it was a generative AI demonstration, right? So they were citing where the sources came from. And I said, can you click through to them? They said, yes. I said, but how do I know that that's, you know, a genuine artifact? Well, I don't, do I? I mean, this is where it gets tricky. Right? Now, it was a genuine artifact, but who's to say? Yeah. And I think we have to be real here. This is super tough, because anything the good guys and girls can do, the bad guys and girls can do, right? And they will. So, yeah, I think the watermarking is a good step in the right direction. But I mean, we live in a world of deep fakes. So
Fake watermark.
Why not?
Yeah. No, I think so. If we think back only a few weeks, there was the two lawyers got their day in court themselves and got censured for their use of ChatGPT to, well, basically they ended up delivering false citations and references to cases that didn't exist. So watermarking as a tool doesn't help in that use case, but it does speak to the accuracy. And I'm going to take us all the way back to the beginning, to the responsibility. And let's face it, I don't want to alienate anybody by saying anything mean about lawyers on this webcast, but I used to be in a firm that sold legal technology, and you would expect someone as well educated and as highly paid as an attorney to not trust the output of ChatGPT without at least checking one or two of those citations, right? I know I would have bloody well gone and looked them up. So we're back to the, if you don't know enough about something, why would you immediately trust it so explicitly?
Okay, let me ask you then a follow-up question to that, Jed, about what that means in practical terms, because we had an interesting question from Arlette in the Q&A about wouldn't explainability also help with the ethical questions? So for what you're describing with being able to find the source, being able to actually do that research yourself, is that the definition of explainability as it applies to AI? And what do you think explainability means in regards to AI?
No, I think explainability, no, well, I understand explainability as in the actual workings of the algorithms. So a vendor can explain to you how the AI, whether it's a old school machine learning that you've trained yourself based on shoveling it 100 documents, or whether it's a generative AI like ChatGPT, explainability is the vendor's ability to walk you through how the algorithm gave you an answer.
But Jed's 100%.
Yeah, go on, Alan.
No, you're 100% correct. It's basically showing how I came to this decision. I being AI.
Showing you working, right? Yeah.
Is exactly right. Now, the challenge there is that's not always possible. It depends on what flavor of AI you're using, right? Because, and when I say it's not possible, I don't mean it would be difficult. I mean, it's literally impossible with some AI systems. It is not possible, right? So there's an argument you should not be using those types of AI for certain things, right? If you cannot explain, then you shouldn't be using it. No matter how cool it is, no matter how well it does the job, you shouldn't be using it. I mean, on the chat there, somebody just mentioned about people being impacted by online job, systems. Absolutely, HR, if we use that broad term, HR is one of those areas you have to be super, super careful. And I can't remember just right now, but there are, anyway, anybody here can Google or Bing, whatever. There's plenty of examples of HR systems which utilize machine learning and AI actively discriminating, right? Actively discriminating. Why? Because it was trained on their old HR data, which was full of discrimination and bias, right? So it just carried it forward. So that there's all these sort of things. And, I think there are some, like the watermark thing is one thing. And I think somebody else has brought up about blockchain. That's actually a very interesting point. I mentioned in my presentation 2 companies, and they're not the only 2, by the way, there's plenty of them, but IPWE and Burst IQ, right? So they churn through tons of data, they use AI extensively. However, all of the data that they churn through is registered on the blockchain. It's immutable. It cannot be changed. It cannot, and there's a reason that they're using AI and blockchain together, because we're talking patents and we're talking healthcare data. It can't be contaminated. It cannot go back and be changed. It cannot be messed with. And so they're utilizing the 2 in harmony. And I think as we move forward, more and more will. I think that's, I mean, they're natural buddies, if that makes sense, when you're talking about sensitive, critical data.
So in the context of AI and largely information management in general, explainability is how the decision was made, the actual algorithm, how was the data transformed, right? And then transparency is where the information came from. So in your example just now, Alan, they're using blockchain for really ultimate transparency. They can trace that medical data. They know where it came from. They know where it went. It just as a general ledger would be able to tell you where money went, right? What about watermarking? Because we did have a question in the Q&A about that. Is watermarking a form of transparency? And what does watermarking actually mean? I mean, none of the news outlets really explained it. They were just like, hey, everybody agreed to watermark. Okay, great. Like, how do I find this watermark?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, but that's the point. It doesn't have to be blockchain, but that's the same thing, right? When you watermark something, well, it can just be a watermark and it's completely pointless. But the theory, at least, right, that watermark ties back to something, right? So, the same as a digital signature, the same as notarizing something, the same as registering something on a blockchain, you've anchored it to something, right? Which is provable and verifiable. And there's going to be a lot more of that going. There has to be. I mean, there just has to be. And I'll tell you why there has to be. It's like, if you're going to set, like, blockchain in healthcare is growing at a pace globally, right? The use of it for good reason. Well, because they wouldn't use the AI if they can't trust the data, right? So the two sort of go hand in hand, right? You sort of got one and the other. It doesn't have to be blockchain, but it has to be something very verifiable. But this is the challenge here when we come to explainability and everything. The reality is that it does limit what you can do with AI, right? It does limit it because there's certain tools you just can't use. They might be better in many regards, right? They might be bigger and faster and cheaper and whatever. And I can't regulate for anybody, but the reality is there are some use cases where even if they work really well, your options are going to be limited because you can't explain how you came to the decision.
Yeah, exactly. And picking up on that, but Kristen is asking in the chat, in the questions, how you guarantee AI is being used ethically if companies are not transparent. Well, it's a simple answer based on what Alan just said. You cannot guarantee anything. How do you guarantee an organization, a company is doing anything? Transparency is a conversation which goes on all the time at board level, and we'll end up with people being, their name splashed across the Wall Street Journal, or end up with people being in jail for one transgression or another. But we put governance policies in place. People don't stick to them. We introduce fines. Regulators back up their regulations with punishment, so to speak. These are things society as a whole struggles with, which of course doesn't mean that Kristen and the rest of us shouldn't be asking the questions. And part of transparency is asking the questions and having the conversation, which is what, which is why I was keen to see AIIM have their input to NTIA, because we're being involved in the conversation. I mean, Alan's a very, very clever man, much cleverer than I, but even he cannot give you a solid answer to every question about AI. Like, there is no genius level dude out there, and don't believe a word Elon says, for example. But we have to be involved in the conversations, because that's how we hopefully air our dirty laundry in public, if that rings it. That's very British saying. I'm sorry I went there. But we have the awkward conversations, and the awkward conversations hopefully drive us towards better results.
Yeah,
you're reminding me of an interesting conversation I had about 2 years ago as a former chief information officer. In my department, I had a team of software developers, and we had a question about where and when are software developers responsible for ethics. And that team's take was, we will do our best to be unbiased as we develop an application and as we curate data that might be used for that application. But we cannot be penalized for doing our best. Where we can be penalized is if you have a feedback loop, which you should have on any good software application. If we fail to address a piece of feedback that tells us we are being biased, that tells us we are being discriminatory or hurting humans in some way, that's where we could be penalized. I don't know, Alan, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and also with Jed's point that, look, you know, it's a cliche, but it's one worth repeating. This is early days. Yeah, AI's been around a long time, but it's really now that, and we're not talking about its use in cell phones and laptops. We're talking about the world of information management here, right?
Yeah.
It's now entering our mainstream. And the conversation, basically, a lot of these conversations have not yet been had, right? We get to have them, and we want to be a part of that. So that's one thing. But I think the other thing is just to step back and to see the wood from the trees. Square 9, actually, that presentation was a good one, right? Because it focused on accounts payable. Listen, most of information management is just transactional documents. They're not high risk, you know, it's just work. And everything doesn't involve, you know, whether I'm going to send you to prison because AI told me to. I mean, most of this is just a piece of paper that goes through a simple transaction and something gets paid or it doesn't. So again, we just got to be real about it, right? There's a lot of uses of AI here where there really aren't any concerns. There really, I mean, you can argue for them if you want, but there isn't. They work, right? They work really well, and they are going to transform our industry. As soon as you start getting into the more textual comprehension areas, right, where, you know, where there's arguments. So you've got two legal documents. You've got one legal document that says, I interpret this law this way or this regulation this way, and you've got another one that interprets it another. Well, which one is right? I don't know, and nor does the AI. This is where things start to get really, really messy. But do I owe Jed $800 because he gave me a purchase order for this? And that, listen, it's not arguable. It's just what it is. And if a mistake is made, guess what? It's going to be thrown out. And somebody goes, what the hell is this? Oh my God, Jed, you're not getting $800.
Oh, come on.
I mean, it's just, yeah, but it's not high risk.
No, exactly.
High
And
risk. We shouldn't talk about AI as if it's all high risk. It's not.
So there's no one size fits all.
No.
Not in the use case and not in the technology either.
No.
And that's, I think that, to Alan's point, it somewhat gets lost in the hype.
It does. Yeah. It does. I mean, most of the technologies that we research and we look into, they're really low risk. I mean, to be frank with you, they either work pretty much 100% of the time, or they don't work at all. There's no middle ground with them. They just work or they don't work, right? But but then when you get into legal tech, you get into healthcare, you get into government, whatever, and if you're starting to talk about, let's talk about it in terms of AIIM, right? And we use this terminology, right? Long form documents, right? So there's text and there's opinions and there's stuff. Yeah, now this is the AI is amazing, but you've got a lot of questions you need to answer and figure out and guidelines to follow. But recognizing that this is PO number 1673, come on, it either is or it isn't.
Well, I mean, yes, absolutely. And I want to link it, Tori, if I may. I'm not sure how we're doing with time.
We're good. We have like about 5 more minutes, so please.
Okay, so Adil is asking a question in the chat around whether AI completely eliminate the need for human intervention in document management specifically, and what are the potential implications of that? Well, I think that links nicely to what Alan was just saying, because it's like, what kind of document are you processing? I mean, if it's an invoice and you're using AI enhanced OCR to pull out invoice numbers and dollar numbers and things like that, then the potential implications for that level of automation, well, people have been doing it for over a decade. Hopefully the AI just makes it a little bit more accurate. The auto summarization of a legal document, or pulling the entity's jurisdiction and case law from a legal document or a contract, you know, that's different. And to Alan's point, that also may not be considered high risk. It depends how good and accurate the AI is. But there is, as we said, there's no one size fits all. So there's no simple answer to Adil's question. It's like, what is the process? What documents are being processed? Whose technology, whose AI are you using to do the processing? So as I used to say a lot when I was a consultant, it depends. Sorry, Adil, there is no answer.
And here's your $800.
Yeah, there's no straight answer unless you want to send me $800, not write one for you.
And I feel like you've just made the implication too that AI is very likely to change the definition of document management or document management processing, right? Or at least extend that definition, right?
I think that's fair. I think, again, definitions are dodgy. So, every organization might have their own definition of what constitutes document management or an automated document process. But I mean, when it comes down to it, this is whether it's AI, whether it's RPA, whether it's just having a good workflow engine, any form of automation is going to help, but it's also going to change. It's going to change the nature of the beast. It's Schrodinger's document, right? If you apply AI to it or not, depends on how it looks.
Yeah. So let's kind of tie all of these thoughts and conversations together with our last couple minutes here. When you think about the next forefront of information management and AI, Alan, you said a couple times, this is the early days. It's the wild, wild west. We have the burgeoning of regulations coming from the US, from Europe, from China, that we're seeing almost like a repeat of what happened with privacy laws a few years ago, right? So we're dealing with the regulatory front, and we're also dealing with a very kind of confusing technology front. The systems, the transparency, explainability of systems is questionable in some cases. So how do we navigate all this? How do we navigate this feeling of the wild, wild west as information management practitioners and leaders?
I don't
You
know.
have 30 seconds to answer that.
I don't know. I mean, well, seriously, AIM and ARMA and everybody else, I mean, they need to step up. We all need to step up, right? Because nobody else is going to do it. That's the issue here. Nobody else is going to do it for us. So we have to step up and do it. And, again, just taking a step back. Listen, AI, the advances in AI over the last 6-7 years have been phenomenal. I mean, they have. But it's going to take time for it to find its place, right? I mean, pockets will adopt it quickly, but in general, it's going to take time. So there is an urgency, right? But it's not like the world's already run down this path, right? Everybody's scratching around. So now is the time. But I'll say it again, if organizations like AIM and, I mean, there's a bunch of organizations, right? But if they don't step up, nobody is going to. And this is where the sad thing is, because there are great advances. They really genuinely are. But the downsides of them are pretty awesome. You can really mess things up. You can mess people's lives up real bad. So I mean, it's not a case of should we must. But if we're waiting for somebody else to do it, we're going to be waiting a long time. Well,
that's a good point. Well said. So I mean, I think on one hand it's don't panic, and on the other hand, as Alan pointed out, actually, badly developed algorithms can literally screw you over and ruin your life if we let them. So as professional bodies and as professionals, we absolutely need to be keeping an eye on this. We need to be involved. We need to be, if we feel the right discussions are not being had, we need to push for them to be had and to be held. And again, in the sake of transparency, those discussions need to be open and public and as transparent as possible. But Yeah, I'm with Alan on this. There's no rise of the machines. There's no T1000 coming back through the time portal to kill me off before I give birth to my son or whatever. We're not quite there yet. So don't panic. Keep abreast of developments. Keep your eye on what's going on. And as an information professional, be aware that you have a role to influence. And people may come to you looking for answers to AI-related questions. So there is obviously a professional development element to that, and I don't know where we're going to go with that yet. None of us do, but we'll talk about it, right? Because again, we're going to have these discussions. So yeah, bottom line, don't panic.
I think that's a good note to end on. Alan and Jed, thank you so much for helping us to author the comment and for your time today to share your insights. Kevin, I'm going to turn it back over to you and we'll keep going on with the show.
Thank you, Tori. That is Tori Miller-Lew, Alan Pelt-Sharp, and Jed Cawthorn. You can find the AIM position statement on AI accountability. There is a link to it in the chat feature, and also you can find it by simply going to aim.org. All right, very good. Great panel discussion. Great linkage there to blockchain, by the way, which is a technology that is often mysterious. So I hope we get a chance to explore the linkage between AI, blockchain, and accountability and transparency and so forth. But let's move on to our next presenter today, and that is Candace McCabe. Candace, are you with us?
I am. Thanks, Kevin.
Hello, Candace. Where are you calling in from?
I am in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm based out of Bentonville. Yes, I work for Walmart in the home office.
Nice.
And
Welcome
so, yeah,
aboard. Well,
thank you.
Candace McCabe is a senior solutions architect for global technical platforms for enterprise architecture at Walmart. And Candace is here to talk about AI bias. What is AI bias and how can we eliminate it? So Candace, tell us a little bit more.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides and we'll get started. So when I first presented this at the AIM conference, I started my session much the same way I'll start this one, which is to say that the initial question, what is AI bias and how does it factor into responsible AI? It's key and central. You know, earlier in the panel discussion, Alan said, how do you ensure that the AI systems are ethical? And it's to keep the human in the loop. And we talked about responsible AI, and we talked about accountability. And so those are a lot of the things that we're going to talk about in this presentation as well. But we're really going to dig into bias. So, I mean, you guys are hearing about AI in every facet of your life, in particular in your jobs, but also just in social media. The influencers that you are following on social media are likely using some of these generative AI systems to actually generate the content that you're seeing. I work in this space doing social marketing for my side gig, and all of the coaches that I see are using these tools. So I decided to pose the question to the AI, what is responsible AI? And I will say that I thought that ChatGPT's answer was lacking. Although it does say that it's about ethical and socially conscious systems and transparency and fairness and safety, right? So it's got some of the keys that we've talked about. I will say that I thought that Bard from Google was just significantly better, right? It goes into a lot more detail. But neither one of these really kind of tell you about how to look at your system, how to do that work to keep the human in the loop, right? So that's your role as an information manager, is to try to stay in the loop. And just to point out, Alan said earlier that there were 100 billion or something hits on ChatGPT in June. ChatGPT also went from an accuracy rating of 74% to 2% from March to July. That's pretty significant. And that's really what we're going to talk about is bias and drift and how to look at that. So what is AI bias? It's when an algorithm produces prejudiced results due to errors in the ML process. And what that really means is that there are biases that are intentionally or maybe unintentionally included in the algorithm or the data. And you have to develop good guidelines and processes in order to look at it. So unintentional things would be things like not having that human in the loop to oversee the AI. Some of it would be having bad stereotypes, prejudice in terms of causing harm to humans. And then there's intentional, right? So you have specific business outcomes that you're aiming towards. And you may intentionally eliminate bad data or look to segregate or protect from bad actors. So where you look for your bias is in all facets. So it's the input data, it's the algorithm itself, and it's the outcome. The biggest thing to start with is know your data. Back in the early 90s, when we started talking about big data, we talked about the V's, really. And that's the velocity, the variety, the veracity, all of those things about the data. And that's one of the biggest things that you're going to hear as a criticism of OpenAI is they've not been transparent about where they sourced their data. And basically they sourced it from all of us without necessarily getting our permission to do so. So really, it's about ensuring that you know the source, that you know that it's of good quality, that you're getting accurate data because you have valid size, and that you are intentionally examining that data for things like protected classes to ensure that you're not harming specific types of individuals. Like Alan said, ethically, you don't want to do that, even though in maybe some jurisdictions it's legal. And then the keys to the models themselves, as was stated earlier, is that they need to be visible. And that means you have to acknowledge that you are using an AI model in order to perform a business process. And be transparent about how that process is working. Look for fairness, and ensure that it's robust. You know, one of the things that we often find when we're building these models, and I come from that IT background, so I look at actually building these things, is sometimes we might build something and it looks great on a small sample, but when you extrapolate that out and scale it up, it's not quite as performant. Its accuracy goes down. You do start seeing more biased results. And so you've got to be able to test it, and you've got to continually monitor that model. So how do you do model testing? Ask what if questions. And this is where you get to put on that like tinfoil hat and think about all of the worst possible outcomes. What if this went really wrong? Ask yourself that question, and then go look at the model and see what would happen if you changed a variable to see what that outcome might look like through the model itself. Build in feedback loops where the model learns from itself. do negatives testing. So where you intentionally inject bad data or you intentionally provide bad business rules to see what happens. And then again, do continuous monitoring. And one of the best things that you can do is actually work to create machine learning testing of the model. So it's kind of having the machines watching machines with a human oversight and always including that human in the loop. So then the final place where you look to do your testing is in the output itself. And one of the biggest things to look for is this concept, and we use this term in machine learning and in AI called drift. And that's the tendency for models to degrade over time. So you originally do a design, it's producing results that you've tested and they look fantastic, but kind of over time, it can move away from that. And that's exactly what's happened with ChatGPT, right? So again, originally they were at like a 74% accuracy rating on some mathematical problems, and now they're down to 2.4%. Well, what's happened? The model has drifted over time. It's starting to self-reference, it's doing some other things. And so you've got to constantly look for the differences between the output and ensure that drift gets corrected and it's a continual correction cycle. Look for data intersection. And this is a really interesting concept. So look for where you have, if we were talking about humans, where there are more than one potential bias points. So if you are the administrator of a system that does credit, and it's valuing people who live in a specific area code or zip code, and it's negatively assessing their credit worthiness, you need to look to see, is that then negatively affecting additional populations? Like, is that an area that has a great school, and so there are a lot of lower income single moms living there, and is that then also negatively impacting women of color? And so look for that intersectionality of minority characteristics to make sure that you're protecting against that type of bias. And again, look for volume. It's real simple to make the assumption that if it worked on this small sample, it's going to work on a larger sample, and that's not necessarily true. And again, the key to all AI systems is continuous monitoring. As Alan said, we're kind of in the early days, wild west, and so we've got to stay accurate. We've got to stay involved, right? That's how we make sure that these systems are performing the way we intend them to perform. And to do that, use some of the things that we've been talking about for the last 15 years, where we're doing agile, right? Automate wherever is possible. And again, use the machines to test the machines, but keep the humans involved. So key takeaways, AI and ML are here. You can't really eliminate the bias, but you can mitigate risks. Continuous monitoring and testing are absolutely essential. And I think I am at time. I may actually, I think I hit it pretty close. So I'm going to stop share and turn it back over to Kevin.
Fantastic. That is Candace McCabe. Thank you, Candace. Candace is a CIP from Walmart. Now, if you have any questions for Candace, now would be the time to pop them into the Q&A feature. That's where we'll be looking to get your questions up in the time that we have remaining. Now, Candace, do I get to select my own index fields? I'm sorry. What about ensuring that my models, my machine learning models and my AI enabled processes are responsible. Do you have any tips for how I might go about making sure that my systems are responsible, as you put it?
I think that the keys are the transparency. So being transparent about the fact that you are using an AI enabled system. If you are buying a system, work with your vendor and ask them those same types of questions, right? Can I test the model? Can I test the output? How do you identify drift? How are you continuously monitoring these systems? Within the AIM community, most people are not data scientists, right? They're not building these things themselves, but asking really good questions and staying engaged, in particular with that, is this doing the right thing? And what's the worst thing that can happen? Questions are key to ensuring that you're ethically and using responsible AI.
And if I'm using a vendor for my solution, how do I make sure that they're testing their inputs and their models and their outputs?
Well, honestly, that's language that should be included in your contract with your vendor, right? Especially because this is such an ever evolving and quickly evolving area. Ensure that you have the ability to audit their testing and see what they've found. Ask those questions, what they're doing to mitigate risk of bias and what they're doing to be transparent. And specifically ask where they're sourcing their data and how they're keeping that data fresh.
So really, it's codifying those parameters for both external for vendor solutions and internal solutions, sort of really making a policy, if you will, about the responsible use of AI. Do you have any specific suggestions of what my policy, some of the elements that my policy should include?
Honestly, if we go back to that slide that I put together, I thought that Google Bard actually did a really good job of
Yes.
summarizing the keys that need to be included into that concept of responsible AI. So it's transparency, it's visibility, it's testability, it's protection from harm. It's intentionally thinking through and continuously thinking through, how do I ensure that this is doing good and is intended to do good?
Well, all right. In the time that we have last, one last question. We are speaking with Candace McCabe. AI is constantly changing. As Alan put it, we're in early days. Things are bound to change. Things are bound to evolve. How can we all keep up with the current trends and capabilities of responsible usage of AI?
Um, Honestly, there are some great resources out there, and I included some of those when I gave the resources list to Nina. One of the ones that I have found that I have thoroughly enjoyed, it's called the Privacy Whisperer newsletter, um, and so there should be a link to that in what I provided. But the author of it goes into regularly AI and open issues with like OpenAI and what they're doing. And another one is, if you're a member of IAPP actually has the AI Governance Council, and you can just get newsletters from that group as well. And so there are constant discussions going on about, oh, this new thing came up and how should we respond to it, and what should I look for in my own system to ensure that I don't have that same issue, because it's so quickly changing. It's going to require a lot of staying involved for all of us.
Okay. That is Candace McCabe from Walmart. Candace, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
All right, let's move on to our next presenter, who is Greg Howenstein. Greg, welcome aboard. Are you with us?
Oh yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good, Greg. Where are you calling in from?
I am actually in Tampa Bay, Florida, so I apologize for anybody if you
Hmm.
hear any thunder in the background. It seems like we might have a storm rolling in right now.
I see. Well, all right. Well, let's welcome aboard Greg Howenstein. Greg is an enterprise account executive with Hyperscience, and Greg is here talking about paving the way for AI in the enterprise. So, Greg, please tell us more.
Thank you very much. I mean, really, the biggest thing that we're trying to help people understand at Hyperscience is really the realities of what's going on with artificial intelligence and really more specifically machine learning. Artificial intelligence, when you actually boil down the definition from all the times that it's been the hot topic in science fiction all the way up until today, really all starts with just the simple concept of a computer making a decision. Any program that you've created, any business rule you've put out there, any of the more complex things you might have done really boil down to they're all artificial intelligence. They're all machines trying to replicate the human decision making or the cognition that we normally apply are only available to team members. But it's all a matter of degrees and a matter of what those different layers and different tool sets can accomplish and how they're actually going to be used inside of organizations. When we look at kind of the overall curve of innovation and the different real revolutions that have happened over the intervening decades, we of course saw where all of a sudden the internet changed everything, and then mobile changed everything, and then cloud changed everything, and now AI is changing everything, and really is that next beachhead into how we can drive real innovation and real change inside of our organizations. You know, one of the statistics I look at is this one of AI itself and the investments in it growing 2.5 times faster than the entire software market in general, just further proving the interest, but also really the attention that it's getting at many different areas. And one of the big things that people think about a lot is like, why are we here now? What is it that has all of a sudden made AI so relevant and made it the thing that really is gathering so much attention? And it kind of goes back to the history of computing itself. When you look at where all of the large mainframes, all of the large actual machines and these huge multi-story devices that literally were taking up entire floors of buildings, they all started with where it was worth it to apply the massive investment to create those devices to then actually get outcomes and large governments, large insurance, really big problems that were trying to be addressed. And as more and more of those computers or computing devices were created, the machines actually needed to then start storing data. That's where you all of a sudden had decades ago the revolution of all the databases, where everything went and how can we store everything, that then led into, well, how can we devise more access and the internet and the actual interchange of information that ultimately then started creating more and more and more data, all while at the same time the cost of computing was being driven down by all of these investments. And really what the current deployment and current interest in AI is enabled by is this decades long evolution that has shifted the point of computing and the point of these systems being created from being systems that processed data and output something to systems actually where the data itself that had once been output is becoming the informer or the controller of these algorithms. That's where you'll hear the term ground truth inside of data science. It's where you're actually using known known truths or known things where it's the actual end results that you would have gotten out of previous tries to make rules-based processes to input into systems to create predictive algorithms on unseen data or unseen documents. And all of that is what is so exciting, because that's what allows us to actually start having the ability to say, how can we automate on what we haven't seen before? How can we create systems that don't have to be trained on every edge case, that don't have to be looking backwards at all the situations I've already experienced in order to know how to handle this one? It's actually about how to create understanding inside of the AIs so that they can actually make those assumptions all within the bounds of the accuracy or the risk ratio that you want to apply to what they're able to do. And that really kind of underpins a lot of what all of this is about, is really understanding how your strategy on deploying AI in the enterprise is going to evolve and where it makes sense to deploy tools that are going to be able to take part of the work and do it in a more automated fashion. The realities, though, is that when we talk to executives, a lot of them are really under, I don't want to say false beliefs, but just have these ideas of how hard it must be to do this. But a lot of them are coming from the point of view of how to do it from scratch or doing it from a real technocentric result or mindset. There's a belief that in order to kind of start getting the results or being able to start leveraging the tools, that you have to staff up data scientists or you have to have a large AI practice inside of your organizations, or that you need to actually understand the end state of an entire process to be able to articulate how this big staff up and how this big process is going to translate into a meaningful business case. And then back to that ground truth that to do any of this, you have to have significant amounts of labeled, normalized, stratified data in order to be able to train or build any kind of AI that you need to then deploy. And the reality is that's true if you're going to be creating an entire data science pipeline from scratch, or trying to use one of the more, we'll say, kind of generalized AI models. When you don't have direct control over what's going in or over how you're deploying these systems, you really don't have the governance function in-house. You don't have the ability to know, what am I doing to account for bias? What am I doing to interact with these systems? You're relying on others, which then requires you to build a lot more to be able to do that. Platforms like Hyperscience and many others in the market, though, what we're focusing on is how to abstract these layers of data science away and these layers of reporting and supervised machine learning loops so that you can focus on having a business user tool. We like to say having a point and click experience to interact with, fine tune, and retain model accuracy. It's something that really is built upon this idea that you shouldn't be trying to create an expertise in all of these extremely complex topics at every organization. You should be being able to rely on fundamental tool sets to be able then to build on top of, so that you can have your business users directly interacting with these platforms and really directly being able to start seeing the benefits inside of organizations. So when we think about this, first you have to actually have the choice of what tool set or what pipeline or what interaction methodology you're going to want to use, and really then leveraging the tools that are provided along with the business information inside of your organization. Hyperscience has a fundamental belief that when you're able to use your own documents, your own data, your own ground truth as the foundations for the models that are going to be deployed inside of your organization, you get so much farther than when you're trying to interpret or interject an external model in. You not only have better control over the ground truth or the realities of what's the foundation of your model, you have better explainability of being able to know exactly what went into it in order to create the predictive natures of it. It also means that you're able to leverage the pre-existing tool sets and having your business users able to fine tune the interactions. And fine tuning is another data science term that is really around that, some of those final revisions of an underlying model, being able to come in and get feedback from the model itself and then say, hey, this is where you were right and this is where you were wrong, and take those answers, take those points of clarification, just like when you're training a new employee on the job that you're aiming for them to tackle, on how they should have behaved or how they should have interacted or what the response should have been. When you don't have those loops and you don't have those points where you can actually drive that learning back into the underlying model, you're going to constantly be dealing with an error handling exercise rather than actually having your business teams able to influence and further improve the models itself that are really going to be the underlying engine for automation inside of the organization. And the point of all of this is to say that we have a belief that we really can democratize AI, that we can make it something that isn't, I'll say, constrained to the realm of a technology project, that it's something more that really the front lines of the organization can get involved in. And then they can really, from a change management perspective, also understand how it's going to be deployed, where it can help, and where it's going to be able to be leveraged to make their lives easier when they're doing processing, and not just seen as something that's coming in to take away jobs, when they can really be a part of the training, can be a part of that fine tuning and understand the interaction between human and machine. They really start understanding the fact that the only way for AIs and machines to learn is for humans to teach it what to do and not to just blindly intercept an idea it might have. You know, when we look at all of this and look at the things that we've been focusing on, our core belief has been on creating this enterprise AI platform. But the first place we've been deploying it inside of organizations is in intelligent document processing. And that's backed up by Neil Ward Dutton's real belief that IDP, or these really highly transactional, document-centric processes inside of organizations, are ripe for these kinds of tool sets and ripe for real innovation using AI modeling to be able to actually look at how you can drive more automation without sacrificing accuracy. And that's a core belief of many people in this space, is that you should not be trying to use these new tool sets to just blindly strive for straight through processing. The goal of all of this is to really create a better than human result while automating, so that you can always have that partnership when it's not confident, and always have the human in the loop to be able to actually aid and assist whenever there is a question, but being able to automate everything that there is confidence on. When you look at kind of the rules, or the rules of engagement around things like this, I love the thing that's come up a few times of how do you do a proof of concept? How do you prove what's going on? And the other thing I think about too is, how do you not only think about how to prove that first use case, how do you think about how to actually create the pipeline inside of the organization of what are the different projects that each iteratively prove something, so that they can be built off of to do that next project. A customer like Mars, customer responsiveness is crucial. And one of the places that they saw it is that really and it's a funny example, but in the total financial processes in the organization, there was a huge focus on how do we actually do finance transformation globally. And instead of trying to say, how do we tackle all of it and try and deploy one solution to do everything, the biggest thing that they said is, how do we actually go market by market and use the wins in one market to then prove to the next market what needs to be done? And one of the key ways that they did this in the invoice to pay process was not only focusing on the true results of the platform, but also on the human in the loop interfaces. Our team at Hyperscience and many other organizations are trying to do a significant amount of work focusing, when we're really working on AI, on not only how to deliver a better outcome, but how to make the tools our teams are working in more pleasant and more efficient by focusing on the user experiences rather than just on the outcomes those team members are delivering. When you focus on how to actually make the tools that your teams work on a better tool for them to be in and day out, not only do you get the outcomes of the actual tool delivering, you also then are able to deliver significantly more actual decreases in processing time just by them being able to work better on the manual tasks. When you think about that, it really becomes something where that human and machine partnership needs to be a critical, real foundational mindset you have. That it's just as important to think about the tools you're going to be giving to your team members and how that they're going to be interacting with it, what the change management is going to be, as it is going to be, well, what is the actual best AI platform? What is the system that we're able to control the data going in, where we know what is actually building the models, where we're involved in that process, so that you actually are able to then to really know, this is how this model was built. This is how it's going to interact. I was a part of the testing. I know where there are edge cases. I know how that we can deploy it with grace so that we actually are able to make our teams better. We're able to actually deliver a better service to our customers, and ultimately going to be able to drive the value to the organization that all of us ultimately are trying to do inside of these processes. At the end of the day, really, all of these concepts boil down to this kind of comparison many organizations are making. I mean, on the left side, we have the behemoths and the most exclusive AI club that's ever been created. You know, these are some of the largest and most well-capitalized organizations in the world that either already own massive data centers or have very easy access to them and very easy access to capital to be able to go take these gigantic public or semi-public data sources and create models that they say are best. You know, I heard the statistic earlier today, and it just kind of proved the point to me of the decline in accuracy of ChatGPT over not a long period of time. It's really amazing how so much money can be spent to create so many things, but when it's done on a finite data set that none of us, as the fastest adopters of any AI tool, were directly involved with, can actually then go and say, well, this isn't right anymore, but now we can't do anything about it. We can't be involved. We can't then say, hey, I want to take that subset and use it over here to do something. It truly is another incarnation of the black box of, okay, here's a tool that has functionality, but I can't interact. While on the right side, it's platforms like Hyperscience, where we take the approach that we think you need to be directly involved. You need to be using your own data. You need to be actually having a simple point and click interface to be able to go through and deliver bespoke AI models that are created specifically for your use case with your documents at heart, so that you can actually deliver a more meaningful and specific result for your organization rather than a application of a generalized result. All of this kind of built off the fact that it shouldn't be that hard to do all of this if you're working with platforms that are trying to abstract the hardest parts away and trying to make it something that you can run on a laptop so that you can actually deliver differentiated results to your organization. You know, AI in the enterprise, it's a dance that's been going for years, and it's one that's going to evolve even more over time. We have a strong belief that there is always going to be the need for partnership between team members and machines, for that human and machine collaboration, even more than just human in the loop. It is something that the point of all of this is to elevate the work of our teams and being able to do it in a way that before regulation, we know what is going on, and after regulation, we can prove why things happened and what the point of all of this was. So I'd love to answer any questions or any things that kind of all this sparked, but we have a strong belief that there's only going to be more investment and more interest in these topics.
Very good. That is Greg Howenstein, excuse me, Greg, from Hyperscience.
You had it
Greg is
right
an
the first
enterprise
time,
account executive at Hyperscience.
Howenstein.
Did it, Howenstein, like Frankenstein, you told me, I know I should remember this. I'm an idiot. What can I say? But Greg, thank you so much. A really great session today, because I am always trying to understand how we really use technology, in this case AI, in real ways, in real ways that really move the needle in terms of digital transformation, in terms of organizational performance. Tell me a little bit more about the input and training of AI. You're all about using our own data to train and deploy AI models.
Oh.
How can we best do that effectively? And can you give us an example of how that is applied in a process that we may know that is common among most of our organizations?
Yeah, definitely. So really the biggest reason we really have this point of view is because we also know, based on real world experience, that every use case is going to be different. Every organization might have their own discrete data points or entities, if you want to get into a real kind of data science term, that they're trying to get out of documents. And the purpose of this process is to create a model to get your specific result as quickly and easily as possible without having to do all the extra work. So if you look at an example of, even account opening statements or driver's licenses or checks, every organization, when they're processing these, might have their own set of fields or their own schema or their own metadata points that they're trying to extract, that we believe it's easy to just say, well, drop in 100 documents and click on those where those data points are and train that model to be able to understand the actual meaning behind the relationships between those fields and the actual ability to find them inside of those documents on the unseen. The things Hyperscience is doing is trying to say, how can we make that process of training as easy and as future-proof as possible? So we're actually doing development and releasing products as recently as our latest release that actually will curate the documents inside of your data sets to be able to say not only, hey, here are different heuristic groups of documents to use in training, but here's the specific high important ones you should use in your ground truth so that you don't introduce bias, you don't oversample, and you're able to get as much predictive automation as quickly as possible.
Now, Greg, you guys at Hyperscience are all about democratizing AI. You mentioned that the perception may be that it's somewhat complicated and you need a team of scientists to do this, but you say it's not necessarily so. How do I do all of this without hiring expensive AI engineers?
Well, luckily, since all of us are in information management, I'm sure we've all created a virtual filing cabinet or a repository or something in a document management system before. And, like any application information management, it all starts with the actual metadata or the taxonomy that you're trying to get out of a document. So with hyperscience, it literally you begin with the end in mind. What are you trying to get out of the documents? Create some fields. You give them data types to say what is the way we might want to use natural language processing to normalize data. And then you train on as small of a sample set as possible to create predictive automation without sacrificing the accuracy. And that's where the magic of hyperscience comes in, because we're able to actually help you see as you turn that dial of accuracy required, what automation rates you might see, as well as where you might need to actually sample differently to create more specific and better ground truth to create more automation. It really is as simple as determining your fields and clicking on the samples to be able then to create something that any business user can be trained on how to do in a few minutes.
We are here talking about using AI in the enterprise. If you have a question for Greg, now would be the time to pop it into the Q&A feature, and we'll try to get it into the few remaining moments that we have with Greg. This question coming in, Greg, how can we use AI within our organization for our learning and development, such as certification training?
Wow, that's an interesting topic. I mean, I'd say that inside of learning and development, there's some topics that you might be able to say, like maybe I've got large data sets that I want to use more like sentiment analysis or summarization topics to be able to actually kind of condense the amount of information we're asking team members to interact with. Also, on the other end of that, I could say that you could also use different tools like named entity recognition to be able to say, hey, maybe I want to actually mine the responses I'm getting in more open form content, try and see if I can see patterns in how people are responding. If I might see that there's maybe suboptimal results in the certifications we're asking people to do, or in the internal quizzes that we're having people actually try and fill out. Ultimately, I think somewhere like training and certification, it comes down to, are you looking more for something that's on the generative side of the coin or on the processing what's happening that will have dramatically different recommendations on the options you have available?
Now, Greg, I often wonder,
Yeah.
we see a lot of examples of using AI in process performance, intelligent document processing. How can we apply these tools in information governance itself?
So governance itself, I think, is something that comes down to the actual processes that you're going to be having where you're interjecting the tool into. It's something that the topic becomes one that it now, when we're using AI and we're going to be using tools that are built on top of data that we have, that we then need to start saying, well, what are we doing to one, govern the underlying data that's going to be inside of these models, the things that they're built on top of? And then how do we make that a part of not only the AI ethics that I also recommend everyone start actually thinking about creating an AI ethics committee or working group, but also then how do we manage that data that's a whole other repository now that we've never had to deal with before? This is now something that a lot of times will live on a lot longer than like operational documents. They're things that are living and breathing intermediate repositories that we need to create specific policies and specific procedures around so that we can really adequately fold it in to what we're doing broadly in the organization.
All right, Greg, it's been great speaking with you today. Before I let you go, one last question from our audience.
Yeah.
What if the information doesn't have a lot of metadata associated with it? How can the information be trained with a lack of rich metadata?
That's a really great question. And that's really gets to the heart of different tools being used for different steps or different outcomes you're trying to achieve inside of real processing of these kinds of data, the artifacts. I like to say a lot of times the nouns are going to change, but the verbs will stay the same in what we're doing. And when you have situations where, maybe it's more long form or it's a sentence out of an email, it's things that it's not a form-based document or something where there's a real schema that can be applied to it. Really, that's where more text classification comes into play. You have to get to data, but once you have data in some form, then it's really about saying, well, given this whole string of text, was that positive or negative? Was that a specific identifier? What was that then the modeling tools use to be able to create that predictive model to label that in the future? And a lot of times this is used for being able to do kind of real broad form classification exercises where you can think of like the triaging of incoming information. What if we could automatically label some of that and just get it to the right place to be able then to start using? And so it's a different kind of tool would be used for things like that.
Very good. That is Greg Hauenstein from
Thanks, Kevin.
Hyperscience. Find him at hyperscience.com. Greg, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Awesome.
All right, let's move along to our next presenter. Jason Cassidy with Shiny Docs is with us. Jason, are you with us?
Indeed, I am.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Hello. Hello, Jason. Hello, it's good to see you again. Where are you calling in from today?
I am in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, where it's warm and sunny right now, probably about 90 degrees out there. So I think most of North America is a little bit of warmth right now. It's great.
Nice. Wish I was up there with you, Jason Cassidy. Welcome aboard. Jason Cassidy is the CEO of Shiny Docs, and Jason is here to talk about cutting through the AI hype and practical steps for real-world implementation. So Jason, please tell us more.
Yeah, certainly. And I do have a slide deck. Should I be driving it on my end, Kevin, or did you want to use the one that I sent you guys?
You can share your screen, Jason.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let me find that on the Zoom here, and then we're ready to go.
Sorry, Jason, I got locked out there somehow. Didn't mean to leave you hanging. But of course, yeah, let's see your slides. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to start actually. Yeah, where we started with that about 5 years ago as Shiny Docs is there was the beauty of where we were with respect to processor technology and the wide availability of algorithms to do artificial intelligence. And we'll get into what I mean by do artificial intelligence was pretty widespread. The problem was that the use cases were ill defined, and even the technologists, what I find like data scientists, for example, were ill-equipped for actually solving customer problems at the time. So I'm gonna tell a quick anecdotal story, and then we'll get into some practical use cases. So we had a customer, still a customer to this day. They wanted to do an entire AI classification of a bunch of moderately known documents. And we did a couple of things. We trained up classifiers on what it means to be particular documents, as well as we did what I'm going to call entity extraction on those documents. So they had particular job sites that they were working at and particular sites that they owned. So we knew a list of those sites, so their names and aliases. So we searched across all of their documents, found those names and aliases within the documents, tagged them, meaning literally we put little XML tags around them, and then fed it into an artificial intelligence model. And we had about 250 known job sites. We put it into an AI model and then applied that model back to the customer. It's across all of their data, and we found 50 additional work sites. Like one of them was literally at the top of a electricity pole that they didn't even know that they were doing work at that. And when they looked at the document that we said contained a location, They went, yeah, this is one we didn't even have in our ERP system. So very practical use of AI. And the issue that we had with that particular customer is they brought in data scientists to data science the data. And they weren't just thinking in terms of little practical things like finding metadata. So the data scientists were spending a lot of time with me going, well, what algorithms are you using? And are you using bag of words and Bayesian inference? And what are you doing? And they wanted to dig into what I considered to be exactly the wrong things. The right things would be, how's your data being prepared to be used to be predictive? And so what data do you have? How are you cleaning it? How are you searching it to find what's in there? And they didn't want to talk about that at all. They wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of which cool algorithm to use. And so that part of the project died at the time, 5 years ago. But it got me thinking of what is it that's wrong with people that make them want to go straight into the heart of the technology? Like when I think of the World Wide Web, I don't think of HTTP and how the browser makes a specific request over the transmission control protocol and delivers HTML over it. I think of the experience that I have. Can I buy something on Amazon? Can I pay for something? That's what I think about. Yet too much, we are too focused on, these technical implementation details instead of on the use case itself. So I apologize for making you look at my picture there the whole time, but I hope you find that background setting the context for what I want to talk about here today. So you are already an expert on what do you need from your information. You need to be able to find it for particular use cases. You need to make sure that it is clean for that particular use case. You need to make sure that it is classified for that particular use case. These are the areas that you should be focused on, not necessarily on which AI am I going to use. Am I going to use syntax? Am I going to use something off the shelf? Am I going to load stuff into open AI? Like that's like the fifth question. The first question is, where's my information? Can I find it? Is it clean? Is it filthy? Meaning, is it just mixed in with a bunch of stuff that shouldn't be used for AI? And the way to clean your information is, quite frankly, the most important piece. It has nothing to do with, can I use it with OpenAI? Of course, you can use any information with OpenAI. Can I find particular piece of metadata? Well, you can only do that if you actually know the pieces of metadata that you're looking for. You can only do that. You can only classify documents if you have lots of examples of good, clean documents to classify. So leverage that expertise first. Identify that I'm an expert in the data. I know pretty well the business case for using the data within my organization. Ask the question, how clean is the information, as examples of what I'm trying to do? And if it's not clean, start hopefully talking to organizations like ShinyDocs to help you clean your data and prepare your information to be used for AI. Because if you could just go straight to trying to create models, you go straight to trying to upload stuff into, for example, into ChatGPT, it's garbage in, equals garbage out. You already know how to prepare data for ethics. What I mean by that is if you know the source information, you've prepared it. So you know the file share data, the stuff from your SharePoint, the stuff from your OpenText or Box or other locations, you know the metadata, you created a model from that, you kept track of which algorithm that you used, you records manage the model in both the source data set. When the computer makes an inference, and it tells you to dig in the wrong place and you strike gold, you want to be able to repeat that. If you dig in the wrong place and you hit a pipe and you explode and die, you don't want to repeat that. So there's an accountability chain associated with the inferences that computers make. To me, that's the biggest part of ethics. And if you don't have that accountability chain looked after, for example, you don't know how the computer's making decisions, it's some black box that you just can't ask it, why did you make this decision? It's disqualified. If you don't know the input data, all of it, then it's disqualified. Because, I mean, not every decision is life or death, but Sometimes they are. So you want to be able to have an accountability chain. And if you know for sure the source data, you know the data set that you curated yourself, you know the model that you created, you know the algorithms that you use, then you got it. So just think about that. There's all sorts of vague ethical questions about should I use other people's data or whatever. Again, as a records manager, as a information governance professional, you already know the answer to those questions. Disgorgement laws have been around for much longer than we've been using AI. The idea of, can I use somebody else's data to make profit without giving them it's whatever they're due under copyright? Of course not. So these accountability questions aren't as complex as what we're making them quite often. So just think about that. Do I know where the information came from? Am I records managing it? If so, we're probably good from an ethics point of view. If not, we're probably in a lot of trouble and maybe even subject to like disgorgement law. So you already have the tools to make these decisions. So predictive AI to classify documents, the idea of not having humans do this work, like this technology has been around for a little while. It's mature. What hasn't been around for a while is the ability to actually prepare your data to be used by AI. So that's one of the areas that I definitely want you to focus on. The three areas that we're going to talk about are classification. So I look at something, do I know what it is? Entity extraction. Is there specific pieces of data inside of there, like a customer name, like a job title, that I'd like to take out to be able to explicitly find, does this information have that? Do analytics on the information. There's reasons why we might want to find particular pieces of information, whether or not we've seen it before. And then finally, there is large language models, generative AI. We spend just because it's cool and neat and contemporary, I do believe we spend far too much time talking about generative AI because it's not really the A use case for business. Like me being able to turn my data into a limerick is cool. ChatGPT can do it. The idea of being able to have a chat interface to search my knowledge base, pretty cool. But I mean, we've had that with chat AI for a little while. So, I mean, certainly you absolutely want to make this information available through large language models. It's one of the three use cases, but let's not forget about the normal easy use cases. I want to find particular piece of information, whether known or unknown, and I want to be able to be predictive with respect to the classification of data. And we definitely want to focus on those. So certainly, let's assume that AI is going to change the world. Well, how will it change the world? It's like perhaps a while ago, somebody on this call might be talking about curating an archive of information. How do I go find the right piece of information and recover it on demand for the business? Obviously, the present and is now cooler. We have digital information. We still have some hard copy information. So we need to have policy, law. We administer cool systems that do it. And we're increasingly working with the business to find out what their business needs and make sure that while they're creating and managing their data, they're adhering to policy and law. There's lots of work there to do. We only want to make that easier. So how do we make that easier? Well, we focus on the business needs in the use of the data, because we're assuming that at some point, once you've created a policy and chose a record system, that the AI is actually going to be doing a lot of the curating of the archive for you. So some of the tactics that we're going to talk about today are the actual ones that will do that curation. It will help the business ensure that they're complying with the policy and law. So your job, perhaps, becomes using automation itself to prepare more of your company's data to be consumed by the AI for a particular business purpose. And I hope that makes sense. Like, it's the job of the future is not prompt engineering. To me, that's silly. It's like, I don't need to be able to do a cooler search using prompts. To me, it is, okay, we generate data all the time. Which of it needs to be used to make future decisions? And am I preparing that data for that particular use case? If you are, then you're doing the future information governance. If not, then you're not. So last thing before I get super practical is, I mean, the accountability for the automation is across the scale. So it's not just record retention. It's not just policing people in collaboration. There's all sorts of different things to consider when it comes to how you are going to be implementing this. I think a lot of people have talked about this at length today, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. So what I am going to talk about, and I hope this is in a sense boring. It's like, Jason, we want to talk about ChatGPT and all the cool future stuff. Well, yeah, but you still want to make sure that you're doing a great job of the stuff that's been around for a little while. How are you preparing your data every day to make it easier to classify the next piece of information that comes in? Do you have a great clean data set of documents so that the next time a document comes in, it can look at this clean data set and go, I know for sure that this is this type of form. I know for sure that this is this type of contract. If you don't have it already as part of your practice, if you don't have the ability right now for any new document that comes across your desk in digital form that is already being predicted by an AI model, you're a little bit behind, even though this may seem like a rudimentary use case. So how do you resolve this? Well, you make sure that you have a good, clean data set that has a label of what the classification is of the content. And I don't mean necessarily records management classification. It might be as simple as, is this a purchase order? Is it a job description? Is it a job offer? Like what the business use of the file is. Include that as part of the predictive capability. And I'm not going to get into the technology. I'll do that in the workshop next week. But there's lots of technology out there to do it, to help prepare your data for identification and classification. And if you're not doing that right now, maybe we shouldn't be talking about generative AI and ChatGPT. We should be talking about going back to this technology from a few years ago and making sure that we are doing it. Next thing is business data. There's business data hiding in every document, every piece of information that's out there. Like if you're in legal, there's simple things like the perhaps litigants or the purchaser and the seller. There's the matter number. There's all sorts of information out there that may be really well known, i.e. I can pre-calculate a search from like an ERP system or from ServiceNow or from Maximo or whatever and find the data in my information. Or it might be unknown, something that you would need natural language to find, like a new customer name inside of a contract. The AI will look at the contract and say, every time I read a contract like this, the customer's name appears here, so I'm going to assume that this is the customer's name. So again, this is natural language. It's been around for a while. We should be doing this for a lot of our common data. So that's another question to ask. Am I doing this for every contract that comes across my desk, or do I need humans to go in there and manually look at it and rekey it? If we're still in the manual, look at it, rekey it, upload it to SharePoint with the proper custom columns and records management data, then now it's the time to go back and look at this simple use case, like using natural language to find specific business values. And then the third use case, so the first one again was classification. Second one was finding specific piece of information. And then the last one is generative AI. All generative AI is I look at a huge corpus of work, a big data set. And whenever we talk about these specific prompts, these business terms, the following words tend to go together to describe it. That's all a large language model is. That's all the question and answer version of ChatGPT is it gives wonderful natural language answers to wonderful natural language questions. It's obviously sophisticated, it's powerful, and where to leverage that is all sorts of places across your business, from your customer interactions to having your help desk have knowledge bases. Like, there's amazing applications to this. It's great for research and these types of things. But again, those are the use cases. A lot of our normal use cases are just normal AI use cases, and we don't want to forget about those. So the last thing I'll do before I advertise that I want to get specific and get technical at some point in the future in a workshop with you is the ethical concerns. I hit this earlier. I wanted to enumerate them because I was at a meeting with a bunch of lawyers This was in New Jersey. Some people on the call will know exactly what event this was. And a lot of people are vaguely talking about ethical concerns. So I put up my hand and I asked, can you give me specific 2 or 3 example of ethical concerns? And these legal professionals were like, no, but we'll know it when we see it. And as a technician, that bugs me. It's like, I want to solve problems that are real, not made up ones. So I picked out a few real problems. Of course, there's lots of other ethical concerns out there. I'm not saying this is exhaustive, but I'm just saying beware of closed systems where you don't know what algorithm that they're using. You don't know all the input data, because when the computer makes a decision and it's a bad decision, you might be really liable for any actions you take on that decision. And if it's a good decision, you might not know how to make it repeatable. So keep track of all of the content that went into creating this computer decision. Records manage any data sets. What's the algorithm? What's the date that this was created? So that you can find out why the computer made the inference. And if you can't do that with a system, if a big vendor or whoever says, no, we're not going to tell you how our algorithm works, we're not going to tell you what the input data is, probably because it's probably because it's a little bit suspicious with respect to copyright and where the source data came from. Anyway, either way, just be aware of that, because you probably can't use it from not just an ethical perspective, it might actually be disgorgement issues. So I hope you found this interesting. Again, if you're only going to walk away with 3 points from my thing, it's just remember, like, AI, 3 really practical use cases, 2 of which are kind of old, that I'm hoping that you should be working on right now. That's your classification, your natural language entity extraction, and then of course generative AI. Totally cool. And I am doing a workshop on this. This is totally practical. Everything that I described today, we're going to actually show it in real life in a week from now. So if you're interested in attending that, free to attend. So, sorry to hijack this a little bit, Kevin, to try to recruit people for another show, but we hope that this audience might find that interesting as well, to get really practical with it.
That is Jason Cassidy, CEO of ShinyDocs. You can find Jason and find out more at shinydocs.com. Jason's been here talking with us about cutting through the AI hype, practical steps for real world implementation. Thank you, Jason. If you have a question for Jason, now would be the time to pop it into the Q&A feature, and we will try to get some questions in here in the remaining time that we have. Now, Jason, as I mentioned in my introduction, generative AI, ChatGPT, it gets all the buzz and certainly has been the impetus to put us kind of where we are today. But a lot of times when I ask about application of ChatGPT or generative AI, we really, much of our discussion is on classical use cases of natural language processing, machine learning. Can you give us a specific example of generative AI in use today? How is it applied today, and what can we learn from it, especially as it applies to information governance and information management?
Yeah, so to me, the best use cases is as a knowledge base. It is like materials handling, for example. If you do not build a bridge to a specific specification, I get that that's redundant. And
say that 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. I cannot. Thank you for the challenge, Kevin. But it's so materials handling, like it's the way of implementing specific materials, not handling per se in this case, but actually materials manufacturing has very specific laws, codes, everything associated with it, and they change and evolve. And to keep up with this type of thing in flight during a job, okay, I'm going to be doing some manufacture of something shortly. I want to talk to the consortium who keeps track of this information on behalf of my type of engineer. There's an old way, which is I got to know how to search through their file shares and through their SharePoints and through their other systems to find the right, control doc, and then go in and find the right material and make sure I'm using the right compositions and all this type of stuff when I go and build this bridge so that cars don't fall into the ocean, or whatever the extreme use case is. The obvious solution for that would be so much better to say, okay, I'm building this type of bridge and I'd like to get the latest control doc that tells me the concentration of iron plus steel plus concrete. and have it respond back and saying, here's the latest specification. That's your cool ChatGPT style interaction that we all crave. And it has wonderful practical use cases. So how do you get there? Well, you take that carefully curated data set from those people who understand the materials that you're using really well, and you prepare that data to be consumed by a generative model. In this case, there's like Hugging Face, which is where a lot of organizations like Facebook and Meta and Google collaborate. That's if you want to roll your own. Or of course, there's ChatGPT and through OpenAI, where you can upload the data from your corpus of work. But either way, if you upload a bunch of stuff that's nonsense, a bunch of Excel spreadsheets that just have values in there that you can't imbue some human interaction from it, you're not going to get the interactive thing that you'd like, that easy use case of me just being able to say, hey, computer, tell me the thing I need to know. You need to actually give it real natural language copy for it to be then able to infer what you're talking about. So that comes back to your data preparation, is how much care am I actually taking to make sure that my data set is pristine before I put it into the AI model. And that's an area where nobody's talking about it. And it's the most important thing you can do right now is how clean is my data? How complete is my data? Because just shoving, let's say I have half junk and half good stuff from my open text system or my SharePoint or my shared drive and just trying to shove the text into some OpenAI, it's not going to be useful. In fact, it'll probably lie to you more than it actually gives you the correct answer. If that's the case.
All right, Jason, this question coming in from Mason. Again, Mason, thank you for your participation today and your question. Mason asks, are there AI policy templates available for different industries? In other words, banking, insurance, healthcare, and so forth.
So it's my understanding that that's being created. AIIM has actually commented on the specific policies that are coming out from the United States government. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to be one of the editors, not one of the authors on that. And of course, you can go to AIIM on LinkedIn to find out more about that and go read our response. We're a little early to actually have the industry associations from healthcare, from the policy bodies, of knowing really what to put in there, because this is so new. We haven't actually had, if we look at the other areas of concern, like nuclear industry, aviation industry, every time there's a crash or an explosion, and it doesn't have to be significant, people can survive these, but every time there is a forensics team that comes in. The FAA comes in and looks at it and said, what went wrong here? How can we prevent this in the future? How would we like to change our policy? We're a little new with respect to AI. So we haven't had those failures. We haven't had a lot of crashes yet, other than perhaps a lawyer using for the Montreal Convention on a particular law case that everybody laughs at, that somebody used OpenAI to fabricate supporting case law. We don't really have a whole lot of examples of specifically generative AI being used for this. So I apologize for a long answer to a simple question, is everybody's got a policy statement on it. However, I'm not seeing a lot of official policy with respect to healthcare, with respect to engineering, with respect to other areas. It's kind of in that information gathering mode. So I'll watch it as hard as you watch it, for sure.
That is Jason Cassidy, CEO of Shiny Docs. Again, find him at shinydocs.com. Jason, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin. Take care.
All right, at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Nina. Nina has some more on the AIM response to the NTIA. So Nina, tell us more.
Absolutely, Kevin. So governments around the world have started the arduous process of developing regulations and standards for artificial intelligence. In June 2023, AIM formally responded to a request for comment from the U.S. National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, on AI accountability. So we encourage information management professionals to use the letter as a tool to help guide conversations, decisions, and policy about using AI in their own organizations. Click the link in the chat to download AIIM's full letter to the NTIA today. As we bring this webinar to a close, a few last-minute reminders. We've recorded this webinar so you can catch anything you want to hear again in a recap email that will be sent within 24 hours. A link to the resources for this webinar was put in the chat. You'll find a copy of this presentation as well as additional resources through that link. Also, don't forget to take our feedback survey and let us know how we did. A big thank you to our sponsors, HyperScience, ShinyDoc, and Square 9, and also contributions from Deep Analysis for a wonderful, informative webinar. Now, before we leave, I'd like to ask Kevin if he has any closing remarks to summarize all of the great sessions that took place today.
Well, it's been a mega webinar, that's for sure, Nina. It's been great. We've had a great panel of guests, starting with Alan Peltz-Sharp, who helped us understand a little bit about where we are today and what the future of AI will look like, how to differentiate between solutions that say they have AI and those that really do. He talked a little bit about the skill shortage as well and how that may be perhaps a good thing for information management professionals where their skills are so important today. Stephen Young from Square 9 joined us as well, talking about accounts payable, which is a real practical application, taking the work out of paper. Accounts payable is a key process for automation, so it was great to get that grounding perspective as well. Then a great mini panel discussion with Tori Miller-Liu, Alan Peltz-Sharp, and Jed Cawthorn about AIIM's position statement on AI accountability. There are 10 tenets in that statement for AI accountability, so get your copy in the chat or go to AIIM.org to get your copy as well. Candace McCabe was with us. Candace is with Walmart, and she talked about AI bias, which is super important to be thinking about and talking about today. Given the massive amounts of data that can be processed, bias can be easily compounded. So she talked about what we can do to identify and correct AI bias. Greg Howenstein came by and talked about paving the way for AI in the enterprise, really talking about that machine human collaboration and ways to implement AI across the enterprise in meaningful ways by deploying and training our own data to deploy and train those models. And of course, Jason Cassidy just finished out with some practical grounding real world steps for real world implementation, how to build an accountability chain and prepare our data for a range of specific applications and use cases. So it's been a super mega webinar today, and it's been great to be your host. I hope that you'll join us next time. But Nina, I guess that's it for me. I'll turn it back to you.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you again to our sponsors and contributors, and thanks again to our audience for joining us today. And this is Nina from AIIM saying, see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.